Oh, no.
Good.
Tried to weasel my way out of this, but
Well, tonight or total?
Aaron, I thought was missing. He wanted me to sit on this thing. So I decided I don't think I have permission. Or if you want to put somebody else on this board, feel free to do so.
Yeah.
He said, I'd like for you to stay on if that's all right. He said, I'll be there for you.
Yeah.
Chapman.
So you going with that?
All about it. And he said, well, this will be some good experience for me. And I'm bored. I come back to him and told him I was running. I had a doctor on for the wife I want to run. I said, that was an opportunity. I said, you got somebody move, make them run, they want to sit on this board, they can take my place. You don't have anybody out there who can stay on it. I said, well, that's time for us. My guy took the place off, it runs out in February.
Oh, okay.
In fact, they got a vote on me to stay on this thing again, I guess next month.
You want me to open it up when we're going to adjourn? The meeting's been canceled. Too many people here. I think everybody getting impatient. They want to know when we'll start. You ready? Charlie, you ready? You gonna do the invocation?
This one can get tabled.
Karen, you ready?
Number two.
At this time, we will call the February 28, 2019 Walton County Zoning Board meeting to order. If you would, please stand as we have our invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Charlie, if you would, please.
Dear Lord, thank you all for all the gifts you've given our community and our county. And please be with our residents in their time of need when they have trouble and stuff here. And please, Lord, guide us here tonight to do the best we can for our county and our community, to make the best decision possible for everyone. Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. We do appreciate everyone being here in attendance tonight. We do have a new board member that is appointed by District 3, Melanie Nipper, vacancy, and we have Vicki Waterman. We welcome you to the board.
Thanks, sir.
Looking forward to your input. However, you don't get to vote for about 3 meetings. Is that all right?
That's good for me.
No, I'm just joking with you. We do appreciate, this is the first time we've had a full board in some time. And we thank the board members for coming. We appreciate our legal staff, Hayward Dykes. Thank you, Karen, hard work that you do to put it on. Renee, the planning department, we appreciate what y'all do, and the legal counsel for the county, Ms. Noyes. And we appreciate y'all being here. Mr. Dykes, is there any announcements that need to be made?
Just one. We had a appeal that was pending with Mr. Dias, the former planning director for the county. They appealed a decision of the board. That matter was resolved, and the case was dismissed recently. So the county and the parties were able to resolve that matter. There's no update on any of the other appeals that are pending, so I don't have any input on that. But otherwise, that's my report.
Did the case get worked out in favor of the board,
Yeah.
our decision?
If Ms. Noyes wants to, yeah, I believe it. There was no change to my knowledge in the board's order.
That's correct. So, and the petition
was moot because whenever we were making our changes to the comp plan and land development code, we fixed the inconsistency that was the basis for the board's decision.
If I remember, the comprehensive plan had language in it that you could be allowed within the 300 feet, and the land development code did not have that same language, so therefore with the information provided, we felt like that the board had to go against the decision of the director because of the 300 feet, and the land development code has been in compliance with the comprehensive plan.
Yes, sir.
Comprehensive plan.
Yes, that's exactly.
So it is allowable use now within the 300 feet, is that correct?
Yes,
Well, how about that?
yes.
That's a good way to resolve that.
Right, well, and so, that highlights the problems that this board and many other boards was having with the inconsistencies between the comp plan and land development code. And with our rewrite, we tried to address all of those issues. So hopefully it'll make it clearer for everybody, easier for you guys to apply your decisions. That's what we're hoping.
So is that something we thank the legal counsel for the county for bringing that to a conclusion that is good for everyone?
No, well, I think we have to thank Kristen Shell at the planning department for her hard work.
We
But
appreciate it.
thank
Thank you. Anything else? David? It's always a pleasure to have the people from the community to come out and be with us and hear the issues. Obviously, there's an issue before us that concerns you, and we're glad that you're here. We ask that each and every one of you that thinks that you may speak before this board, if you would stand, raise your right hand, and swear that the testimony that you give before this board will be the truth. So if you would, please stand and raise your right hand.
Do you all swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
I think we're ready to get started. The first item on the agenda is the Watkins Carriage House variance. Mr. Carpenter?
Yes, sir. Staff is requesting this item be tabled. The Watkins Carriage House variance, there have been some code violation issues in the meantime that prevent this case from moving forward until those are resolved.
I'm glad to see that the county is recognizing that it needs to be resolved. I have a motion. May I have a motion to table it?
Motion to table it?
Second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
I was joking. You can vote with us. Second item on the agenda is the horsepower pavilion. This is an item that is new to the board. I think I would like for Ms. Bradley to come up before the board, and this is something that we're just starting to hear. We've never heard these cases before. There's two parts to it, but she's going to explain to you why it's new, so when one is introduced, you will understand the second one does have some issue with the first one. Renee?
Good evening, Renee Bradley for the Walton County Planning Department. The first request is for a variance. Now, this variance is due for the neighborhood commercial use that the applicant is requesting, which is a cafe and a wedding venue. What the variance is for is the location criteria in the Land Development Code in the state residential, which requires that any neighborhood commercial not be within a mile of a general commercial land use. So without that variance, they're not allowed to do the neighborhood commercial use. The second request for this is the conditional use, which is the request approval of the conditional use. Conditional use in a state residential is the neighborhood commercial, which would be the cafe and the wedding venue in this case of this project. So basically, the conditional use is the second request here, but the first request is dependent. We have to have the first request, the variance, for the second request to even be applicable in this case. Because if they don't meet the distance criteria, then they can't do the neighborhood commercial.
Does anyone have any questions about the distance criteria? Does she need to explain it to you one more? Because she had explained it to me twice, so do it one more time.
Okay, so one is state residential. To be able to do a neighborhood commercial use, you have to be over a mile from a general commercial land use. This project is like a third of a mile from a general commercial land use. Therefore, they don't meet that distance criteria. That's what the variance request is for, is to be able to meet that. The applicant will present their case on why they feel like, because the reason that's in our code is to prevent strip zoning along the highways. for commercial. They'll have to present their case on that to why they feel like they're not going to be creating that issue. Second, the conditional use. The conditional use is for the cafe and the wedding venue. The RV park is not part of that conditional use, so that's really not what you're voting on. I want to make that clear. The conditional use is only for the neighborhood commercial. The RV park is an allowable use within the estate residential land use as long as there's a recreational component tied to it. So, do I need to explain any more?
What's the recreational component that's tied to it? The
Well,
horses?
The recreational component, in which I will let the applicant go through that with you, there is some, speaking of putting horses on the property, to be one. Second, they are in close proximity to the bay. They have actually done a thing as part of their RV park to show all the accesses to the bay that's in the local area where they can get to that. There's also, if my understanding is, a alcohol that comes in on the owner's property, which is not exactly the property that we're asking for this request for, and there's also a recreational pond on the property. So there's several different aspects, and of course the wedding venue's got also some recreational components to it. But I'd feel a lot more comfortable letting the applicant argue that case.
But just for the record, the RV use is allowed. It's not up to this board to determine if they meet the criteria for, what did you call it, recreational use. It's up to the staff.
That's correct, sir.
So we don't have anything to do with the RV meeting the criteria by recreational. That's not before this board tonight.
No, sir, that's a minor development order request that's going through technical review, and as long as they're under the major criteria, then it would be a minor request for at staff level and the director's final determination on whether they're meeting that use.
And nothing to do with us.
No, sir.
So the RV has nothing to do with this board.
That's correct, sir.
Any issue tonight, it has nothing to do with it.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who's here to present their requests on this variance request?
Good evening. My name is Michelle Baker. I'm with Baker Engineers. I represent the owners as their engineer and their agent.
You're an engineer?
Yes, sir.
You have your certificate, proof of insurance, working comp?
Sure, it's in my back pocket.
Okay.
The site plan file. Kate, show the site plan file. So turn it over.
You understand
Okay.
what we're doing? We're gonna do the variance request first.
Okay, and I'm just going to kind of give an explanation overview to kind of just explain what this project is.
Okay?
And just go from there. I'd like to first say that I agree with the staff report, and I want to thank them for their time and effort, and I want to thank the board for their consideration and for listening to us tonight. The proposed development will be located on 24 acres at the corner of Highway 20 and Aliqua Drive. The owners, Fred and Kate Holland, live in the single-family residence that is adjacent to the property on the northeast side on 12 acres. The existing use of the 24 acres at this current time is pasture for donkeys that were rescued from Hurricane Michael. There are 2 existing buildings on the subject property. One is used as a guest house and one is used for storage. The owners also own a property on the eastern border that is on the southern side. This property is 2.5 acres and it has their barn. The proposed development will be built in 2 phases and consists of constructing an RV park and campground with a cafe connected to the following outdoor recreational activities: equestrian activities, an on-site recreational pond, a nature walk, a covered outdoor children's playground, and glamping experiences. Glamping is defined as a form of camping involving accommodations and facilities more luxurious than those associated with traditional camping. The glamping area will also be used as a wedding venue for a unique wedding experience in a teepee. Phase 1 includes the cafe and the teepees. Phase 2 includes the RV park. The RV park and the teepees with the cafe serving the RV park are allowed as a primary use. However, in order for the Hollands to open the gates and allow the public to enjoy the cafe with its 6,000 square foot playground to the public and host weddings at the teepees, she needs conditional use approval, which is why we're here today. The Hollands truly want this to be a benefit to the community. As well as hosting weddings, they would like to host special events for the community in the teepees. For example, at Christmas, they would love to have children come to the teepees and visit an old-fashioned Santa Claus. Since this property is on State Road 20, which is an arterial road, and the development is minor in scale, it meets those requirements of the conditional use. Another component of the conditional use is that any property zoned commercial be no closer than 1 mile from the development, as Renee has stated. Since there are commercial uses to the east of the property within the 1 mile radius, a variance is also requested. If you look at this land use map, I just printed this out to make it a little clearer. The black line that goes around it is the 1 mile radius. You have to look really hard. That little triangle, it's approximately half an acre, maybe a little bit over. That's where they sell electric cars. That's one of the commercial uses that's available right now within that 1 mile radius. The other one is this commercial area that's approximately at 1 mile. There's storage units up there, like the kind that you just rent to keep your stuff.
Many storages.
Yeah, like little mini storages. So please notice to the west of the property, there's Eglin Air Force Base, that's what you see in blue, which extends for miles. To the south of the property, you see single-family residence, interstate residential, and then you get to the bay. To the north of the property are more single-family residential places, some agricultural, and then Eglin Air Force Base. If you look at this layout, you will notice there is no property within the state residential zone that is greater than 1 mile from the commercial districts I just pointed out. This effectively limits neighborhood serving retail or service to 0%. So that means in addition to commercial development being extremely limited due to the location of Eglin Air Force Base and the bay, there's also no way to use the allowable conditional uses in neighborhood serving retail and service as specified in the code. I don't believe it was the intent of the code to so severely limit the allowable conditional uses and cause this hardship. As Renee stated, her interpretation of the code is just not to have like strips of commercial going through a state residential. So another unique aspect to this property that is important to consider is it is the largest property on State Road 20 in a state residential. That makes it perfect for this primary use of the RV park with the recreational uses and the allowable conditional uses we presented. However, the Hollands will be denied their allowable conditional use of the property due to the 1 mile radius condition without a variance and deny them the opportunity to provide a service to the community. Also, it's important to notice that neighborhood serving retail and service is required to be on an arterial or collector. So it's not just anybody within a state residential can try to do this type of project. So it's not really feasible to north or south of this project to have any type of commercial. So just briefly, I want to discuss the aesthetics and setbacks of this property. Since this is a very large property, the majority of the property would be either pasture land, landscaped area, wooded area, or pond area. And by large, I mean 85% of the property. For landscaping around the perimeter, all existing trees and vegetation will remain. Any areas with gaps in the trees or vegetation will be filled with new vegetation. Also, there's 17,268 square feet of landscaping proposed in the vehicle use areas. All this open space and landscaped area means this is a very, very low intensity project. There is only 14.7% impervious area. The FAR is 1.1%. The allowable impervious area is 30%. The allowable FAR is 25%. So the owner is keeping it well below the threshold. And the reason for this is to keep the property very well insulated, protecting the privacy of the visitors as well as the surrounding neighbors. I believe y'all have the site plan, but I did print out a bigger one in case I needed to point to any of the setbacks for y'all. But the cafe has a setback of 207 feet from Highway 20. And the rear setback towards the south where Miley Road is 1,178 feet. That's 1,178 feet. The setback to the eastern boundary is 280 feet. And there is no neighbor that touches her property except for one. She either owns it or it's a highway or a road. The RV buildings are no closer than 188 feet from Highway 20 and 646 feet from the southern boundary. There will not be an RV closer than 330 feet from the property boundary adjacent to Miley Road, or closer than 280 feet to the eastern boundary. The TPs for the events are not closer than 221 feet to the eastern boundary and 813 feet to the southern boundary. Since the setbacks required are 10 to 15 feet, these all greatly exceed the required setbacks. This just means the development is extremely well insulated. The only building that is close to property is the existing storage building that will remain to just be used as a storage building. In closing, I'd like to say the commercial component of this development is intended to be a benefit to the surrounding community. Not only will it provide a restaurant for the area, it will provide jobs. The owners intend to employ 10 to 15 people for this development. In addition, the wedding venue will provide jobs for bakers, servers, photographers, etc. The wedding venue is the wedding venue is very unique in an enchanted setting created by Ms. Holland's artistic abilities. Several brides have lost their wedding in Panama City due to the devastation of Hurricane Michael and have reached out to Mrs. Holland about her possible venue. This would be another unique and beautiful way to highlight the natural beauty of Walton County. Now, if you need me to go back over any of those setbacks or any of the things about the land use and the commercial, I'll be more than happy to. Yes, sir.
All of the parking that's there is for the assembly of weddings.
The parking is the combination of cafe and weddings.
So maximum capacity for wedding and cafe
Right.
use.
That's right.
Basically, you have a parcel of land. Let me ask you this, are these structures built, or will they be building the structures?
Well, the cafe is already there. That's what they use right now as a guest house. They will expand it a little bit, but that is an existing structure.
What about the others? Will they be added?
The reception area where you drive into the RV park would be added, and the shower and restroom for the RV park would be added.
But all the other structures are,
That's the only thing that's needed, the storage building, the 2 buildings for the RV park, the cafe, and then the teepees themselves.
you're not talking about a large square footage that is gonna be built.
Right, like I said, the FAR is 1.1%, so you're talking less than 12,000 square
Square
feet.
footage wise, those structures that you're building is less than 2,000, more than 3, less than 4?
I think it's on there, the cafe's around 5, but the other 2, the RV park buildings are smaller, around 2,000-ish.
And they will be constructed.
Yes, sir.
So basically what you have 24 acres of land that's kind of isolated,
Mm-hmm.
and you have the structures already there, and the setbacks from the RVs is gonna be well 200-300 feet. So
Yes,
it's
sir,
gonna
it's
be-
330 feet in
So
one
it's gonna be
way.
kind of isolated within that property, is that correct?
Right, it's up towards Highway 20, but centralized in the middle of the property.
And they have a fence all the way around it?
Yes, sir.
And they will maintain that fence all the way around it?
Yes, I don't know if you've ever seen that fence. They have a beautiful iron fence.
It surrounds the property, right?
Yes.
And you're gonna put landscaping to buffer more, you said?
Did you have pictures in your packet
Sure.
that kind of showed the landscaping? I brought some more pictures with me that I'll hand out and pass over to y'all.
And this is in the Portland area, is that correct?
In the what area, I'm sorry?
Portland community?
Yes, it's in that Portland
In the
community.
community, and there's only 2 commercial use, one of them is a mini storage, and one
Mhm.
of them is a go-kart sales, and that's why you have to come and ask for this distance.
Yes, sir.
And that's what we're dealing with first.
That's the distance part, and that's why I was just trying to point out how very limited commercial is out there. And as staff said, the code was just trying to limit long strips of commercial, so,
Hold on one second. Charlie. The board was handed some photographs. We're gonna mark that as applicant's number 1.
Slow enter. Go ahead, Charlie.
The RV park itself seems to serve as a buffer in between the majority of the other neighborhood to the south. So that like there would be RVs in between the wedding area and the cafe area. So that there'd be Highway 20 and then like wedding and cafe area, and then the RV park would buffer it even further. And then there's a significant amount of just wetlands and field.
Yeah, any trees are remaining. There's quite a bit of trees along Aliqua and along that eastern buffer. And then she's also adding a bunch, and she doesn't mind adding even more if people feel like that's not enough. Like, we can add more landscaping.
But the RVs themselves would block a lot of the view from the,
Yes, it would block some of the view. It's because they'll have their own landscaping as well. She
Yeah.
plans to landscape the RV park heavily. Towards the south end, there's wetlands on one side, and those are wooded, so that kind of blocks some of it. And then on the other side is the stormwater pond for the development, and that actually has to be built up some with the berm, so that's gonna kind of block the view a little bit
Yeah.
because of building it up, and then it's gonna be like a long expanse of stormwater pond that's just gonna look like a pretty wet pond.
yeah.
So it's, like I said, the cafe's 1,178 feet from the southern boundary, so it's quite a
Yeah.
ways away.
Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
I have a question, Ms. Baker,
Yes.
and this actually, I might ask Ms. Bradley as well, or to whom might be better to address this. The primary uses allowed under 2.02.03 B 3A are listed: general grocery store, feed sales, bait and tackle shops, and a few other things. Those are allowed at present, correct?
Yes, sir, because they're basically an agricultural component use.
Okay,
And the state residential has a non-functional residential agricultural use, and all of those that you just listed are part of that.
all right. So, at present, a grocery store or bait and tackle shop is a permitted use.
It is.
And the only reason the commercial use is in question is because it is under a mile from another commercial use.
For the neighborhood commercial, because the uses that you're talking about are more primary uses that are allowed under agriculture
Okay?
for the estate residential.
How is a coffee shop deemed that much different from a bait or tackle shop?
Well, cafe, the
Okay.
coffee shop's a roadside vending permit.
Okay.
But the cafe that would be there, it's not one of the listed primary uses, therefore it's a neighborhood commercial use, it's the only way they can get it.
Okay, all right,
Okay?
I follow.
All right,
Thank
thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone else? Do you have any questions? What we would like to do, I think, if it's good with the board, give you the opportunity to just sit down. You will have the opportunity to come back. You may come back before the end, but you would definitely be the one to close. But I think we will
Thank you.
we will listen to Renee, and then we get with the testimony of the community. So Renee, if you would, please. Your position on the variance of this.
First, sir, I'd like to enter the staff report into the record, please.
So enter.
Thank you. On the variance, sir, we have found that the variance meets the criteria. We have no objection to the variance. And on the conditional use, sir, would you like for me to go through that criteria with you?
Conditional use?
And
No.
we'll wait till we get through the variance?
Yes, let's deal
Well,
with the variance.
It's staff's finding, sir, it meets the land development code and the comprehensive plan for the variance.
Renee, could you go over the criteria real quick? The
For
seven
the
criteria?
variance?
Yes,
I'll
yes,
be
ma'am.
glad
Just as, and what staff has found and its, or the findings staff has made regarding that criteria.
And I apologize, guys, I don't do these variances every day, so y'all forgive me.
We can give you a chance to gather your thoughts if you need to.
Yeah, I got it right here.
Okay.
Okay, so standard for granting the variance, the granting of the variance shall be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the regulations imposed by this code or the land use district in which it's located, and shall not be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to the public welfare. The staff's response to this is that the proposed variance is not expected to be injurious to the surrounding neighborhood or public welfare. The intent of the code is not to create commercial strip development. There is a general commercial zoning within 0.3 of a mile of the official zoning map, within the 1 mile criteria of the neighborhood commercial allowances in estate residential. Even though there are commercial properties within the 1 mile radius of the east, to the east, Eglin Air Force Base is adjacent to the western boundary of the site, and the Chattahoochee Bay is located to the south, which limits additional neighborhood commercial development in this area. Number 2, the granting of the variance will not permit the establishment of any use that is not permitted in the land use district. The requested variance does not create a use that is not permitted by right within the estate residential zoning category. Campgrounds, RV parks connected to recreational uses are a permitted use in a state residential zoning district, and neighborhood commercial uses are permitted as a conditional use in a state zoning district. There must be proof of unique circumstances. There must exist special circumstances or conditions fully described in the findings applicable to the land or building for which the variance is sought, which circumstances or conditions are particular to such land or buildings do not apply generally to land or buildings in the district, and which circumstances or conditions are such that the strict application of the provisions of the code would deprive the applicant of the reasonable use of the land or building.
You want her to read the entire staff report?
I was actually hoping she would just kind of abbreviate it and say
I think she
certain
abbreviated
special
it.
circumstances, and this is what we found as a special circumstance.
I think she
This is
covered
a
it.
unnecessary hardship, and this is what we found to meet the criteria of the
Well,
unnecessary
I think
hardship.
she covered that. Thank you, Renee.
All right, well, the parcel for which the variance has been sought is over 20 acres, so I think that, that makes it a little bit difficult not to get within that 1 mile radius for that general commercial land use, and the largest in the surrounding area. The applicant stated that the parcel is too large to make it feasible just to use it for a single family development. The proof of the unnecessary hardship, the strict application of the code would deny the applicant the conditional use criteria to allow neighborhoods serving retail commercial.
Thank you, Renee.
All right, thank you.
We would like to hear from anyone in opposition of this variance. State-
Yes.
State your name for the record, please.
Elizabeth Billheimer with Clark Partington, and I represent Hilda Clements, who's right there, and Sonia Clements.
Is that a law firm?
It is, and my mom and my sister, actually, they own property at 95 Miley Road, which is just to the south of the subject property. And then Sharon Nickerson is a tenant in 95 Miley Road, and I'm also representing her interests here, since a leaseholder can have some interest in a zoning or a variance request.
Sure.
So, my clients, for the record, they object to the variance request. And I had submitted a written objection, and I'm not sure if it was delivered to the board.
Go ahead and brief us on it if you will.
Okay,
please.
sure. So just kind of as background, in the audience tonight, there are other owners. Some are a little reluctant to come forward, but I believe they will. But if everybody would raise their hand that are objecting, just to give you a sense of the other owners in the neighborhood that are interested in, they're in objection of the variance. So the subject property is in a state residential zoning, which by its very nature it limits non-residential uses. And I think the most important part here is there are 5 delineated primary uses for the property. So even if the board were to deny a variance for the cafe and for the wedding venue, there are other uses that the applicant could make of the property. She may not be able to develop the property in the manner in which she envisions, but there are other uses. She's not left with a hunk of land that she can do absolutely nothing with. And I think that's something really important to note.
Well, let's touch on that a minute. Go over the use that is allowed. Read the uses that's allowed.
Sure. Single family residential detached.
Which is how many per unit?
So, every 5 acres, you
Every
can.
5 acres.
Yep, so you could subdivide. Not the last owner of the property, but the one before that, he actually did subdivide it and had advertised it as 5-acre estates. And then he found a buyer to buy the entire parcel, and he developed it into the
Okay.
horse farm.
What's the next?
Short-term vacation rental units detached. So
Okay.
I envision those as the little cabins, I think on 331 and Freeport.
How
there are
many
some-
per acre?
I don't know the answer to that.
Quite a few.
Yes, quite a few.
Okay, go ahead.
And then you get into the agriculture, aquaculture, and silviculture activities, and those, I think they were listed into the record. There's kennels and veterinary services, which is similar to the refuge, which is down Whitfield Road, right in the same area. Rural neighborhood general or grocery store, a feed store
Hey.
out.
How many square feet?
So total of, I think it's 5,000.
On each,
No, I don't think there's a limit on these
so
these
they
particular.
they could build a Publix.
Pardon me?
They could build a Publix. They could put a
No.
50.
Well, no, because estate residential, it limits non-residential uses except for these delineated ones that are agricultural related, aquaculture related, or silviculture related. So it's specifically designed to not have commercial or neighborhood
Did you
commercial.
say that it could have a grocery store?
That is one of the.
Did it limit it?
It says a rural neighborhood general or grocery store. So it would depend on what the definition of rural neighborhood general or grocery store.
Well, just hold that thought. I'm trying to get to a point. I understand, and I'm just trying to get to a point. And Renee, what's the square foot is allowed in that grocery store?
12,000 square feet.
How many?
12,000.
Okay.
Would that be a Dollar General?
Yes, it could.
It could be a Dollar General there.
Along with the food store
Yes,
and along with the feed store.
yes.
So you talking about 12,000 square feet for the grocery store, 12,000 square feet?
Just one project, 12,000 square feet in state residential.
Not a grocery store.
That'd be maximum.
For every 5 acres?
No, sir. If they was to divide it and come in and get separate into each 5-acre tract, and they wanted a project on each one, they could get 12,000 square feet for each 5 acres.
Okay. So you see, there could be a large commercial development that could be 100,000 feet. Do you agree with that?
I disagree with that.
Okay,
because
tell me why I'm wrong.
Well, I disagree because it is limited to the nature, like it could be a
Okay.
general or a grocery store, and I agree with that.
I'm not here to argue with you,
It's just-
okay?
I understand.
But we're trying to get an understanding here.
I completely
According to the
understand.
staff, they said that they could break it up in 5 acre, there'd be 24, you could get 5 times 5, you could probably get 4 5s. If each 5-acre tract is entitled to a 12,000 square foot, you could take 5 times 12, that's 60,000 square feet of commercial use. That's the testimony of Renee Bradley. Do you feel like that's right or wrong?
Well, for each of the 5 acres, and I
Right.
think there may be some limitation on if it's in the back and not on an arterial road. I don't know if that restriction would apply if you're going all the way around, because
But you agree that it could happen?
it could happen
Okay.
as a primary use,
Okay.
right? If it's one of the delineated ones.
Right.
Which this is not. The neighborhood commercial or the general commercial that they're looking for to do this property is specifically listed as a conditional use. So in other zoning districts, like rural residential, neighborhood commercial is actually a primary use. So in Choctaw Beach, as an example, you can have neighborhood commercial and all of the things that are permissible.
But let's go back and what they're asking for. They're asking for a wedding venue, a cafe. The structures is already there. This variance, if it's granted, it would be a variance with the land, conditional use that stays with the land, that they can't go back and keep adding buildings and all that stuff. It's kind of, for the use they presenting tonight. And I'm just trying to ask, how can you oppose which is gonna be somewhat of a limited cafe use because of the square footage, and the use of the wedding venue is not gonna be used every day, whenever you can have 60,000 feet of commercial use that could be used every day for people in and out. So I'm trying to understand why you're opposing it whenever it could be such a greater disturbance to me that I wouldn't want next to my neighborhood.
Well, I think the opposition, at least for my clients, is letting in the residential, neighborhood commercial or commercial use of the property. So opening the door to commercial development. And I take your point.
But it's limited. This board will limit it tonight.
No, I understand what you're saying, and they could use all the things that are in primary uses. The Walton County has saw fit that these are the things that they'll allow in a state residential, right? And they have to be, it's parcels greater than 5 acres. You gotta be a little over 5 acres. And I agree, there could be, you know, each 5 acre tract could have something
Well,
on it.
let's
I
touch on,
I see that.
let's touch on something else. They could put a 24-acre RV park there. They could have 1,000 RVs going in and out of there. Would you rather have that?
Well, that's actually a primary use. There is, I
They're
mean,
allowed to do that,
that's what it says.
okay?
They just can't have the cafe part of
But
it.
what they're doing though is, I think they limited it to 55 units, but they wanted this other cafe and wedding venue. Am I wrong? I mean, that's what we're here for, is discuss
Okay,
it.
so as I understand the development, it's in 2 phases. The first phase of the project is the restaurant, a 5,300 square foot restaurant.
That's already existing.
It's now I think it's a bunkhouse now.
Right, but it's there.
And they're gonna add on to make it 5,300 square feet. I don't know how big it is
Okay.
now. And then the wedding venue. And then in 2 years, they're planning to add the RV park, although I think there's a note on the drawing that they may or they won't be held to like the development date and, you know, completing it or starting it by a particular time.
Right.
So here they want the commercial use of the property before anything else. So
Right.
before a primary use, or a conditional use that they could make. I mean, they could put a cell phone tower based on the conditional uses.
Right.
Our concern is the county limits neighborhood commercial development every mile. So basically they're saying spread out the commercial development every mile. So every mile you can have some neighborhood commercials supporting your surrounding area. And we would like to stick to what the code provides.
Okay.
A cafe is neighborhood commercial, and it's a conditional use. And what we're struggling with is if the county says you can't have it, we're trying to understand how a variance could be granted. There's nothing unique about this property. They could do all the things that you cited before. They could develop it as all the primary uses. And I understand what you're saying. You're trying to understand why we're in opposition to it. And it really is opening the door to the the neighborhood commercial development.
I'm not gonna beat this horse to death no more, but to me, when I ride down Highway 20 and I see that house there, and I see their rail fence, and I see, you know, it looks like a nice little quiet farm. What's allowed is when I go through there, they tear the fence down, they open up a big parking lot, and they build a big 12,000 square foot grocery store there. I'd rather ride by there and still think that it's a wedding venue or a cafe than have a big grocery store sitting there that to me would be more offensive for the neighbor. That's just my personal opinion.
And I think, you know, and I would not be being honest with you if I didn't say people wish that they couldn't have an RV park there, but they can't. It's in the code.
Right.
You can't run away from something that's in the code that is allowed.
Right.
The parts that we don't want to open the door to neighborhood commercial, because what's coming next, right? What conditional use for the next piece of property
But
is
we're
going to come up?
limited it. It's gonna be limited tonight. They can't put another use there without coming back before this board. This is limited to the use only.
Right,
You have the opportunity, to my understanding, talking to staff and I believe the owner sitting here, they're sitting there and saying, if you allow us to have the cafe, the wedding venue, and the RV, we're done. We're not gonna add anything else. Is that true? You have the opportunity to limit it tonight. And
Right.
if you don't, then they can just do so much more that would be more offensive to the neighbors. That's what I can't get my head around. I mean, if
Well-
I was a neighbor, I would welcome that because the structure's already there. If we deny this, you know, they could break it up 5-acre tracts off the Highway 20, and they could have 12,000 square feet of neighborhood serving businesses that's allowed. And if you're good with that, I understand that, but if I was a neighbor, I'd rather have what's there used for a purpose that we're going to limit it tonight. They can't just put anything else there.
Right. So, I understand what you're saying.
Okay?
And we are opposed to the variance letting this neighborhood commercial in.
Okay.
Because as it stands now, it's only these few things of commercial that can be there. The rural neighborhood general store, a feed store,
Okay.
but not every neighborhood commercial use. And I have the list of the different neighborhood commercial uses, like a bed and breakfast. That's a neighborhood commercial use under the code because it's conditional on being every 1 mile, which this does not mean. They couldn't put a bed and breakfast there. They couldn't put retail shopping. It has to be, it's very limited in the primary uses under the aquaculture and silviculture and agriculture. What you're referring to as commercial uses, right? There's a delineated list of them. But the county saw fit that for estate residential, that neighborhood commercial would only pop up every mile along Highway 20 in that area, places that are zoned estate residential. It would be limited non-residential uses. And we would like the county to stick to the code as it's written. Now, just a couple minutes on actually the standard itself for a variance. It has to be some unique hardship, and we don't think there's a unique hardship here. There is other uses of this property, and we've talked exhaustively about other uses of the property that they could make of it rather than this particular use. We're just worried about, and I understand what you're saying, it's limited, but this variance will travel with whoever comes next, right? It'll always be there. Once the door opens, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle. The door is open. It's a 5,300 square foot restaurant, a 3,000 square foot wedding venue. There has been some development, I think, of the platforms that the wedding venue sits on. Because they're very large teepees, so it's 3,000 square foot. You can imagine how big that is. I think the platforms have already been constructed. And I mean, I think the other issue that we have is under neighborhood commercial, outdoor music is prohibited. And we have some concern about whether allowing a wedding venue would run afoul of the outdoor music, where the venue itself, it's not a building, it's not a structure, it's I don't know what the fabric, I don't know if it's fabric, some kind of material on the outside of it that would perhaps run afoul of the sound or the sound requirements. So I think if you look at the development strictly, they don't meet the conditional uses. They have shown no special circumstances. One of the applicants, when she submitted her application about special circumstances, she talked about the military owning the piece of property that's just to the west of the property, right along Aliqua Drive. The military's owned the property a long time. The county is surrounded on all sides by military property, and it would seem that just the ownership of the property owned by the military doesn't give rise to the need for a variance to allow commercial activity that the Walton County and the Land Development Code said should be limited every mile. There's no exception written into the code for when property is owned by the military. You get some kind of special circumstance when you're right next to them. I think the legal standard, even in the code, is there has to be some substantial evidence that shows the unique circumstances. In this case, I don't think there's nothing unique about the property. It's a large parcel of property. It can be subdivided. They can build multiple single-family homes. There's conditional uses that they can meet. In order to find a hardship, the law does say that the hardship has to render the property virtually useless. And in this circumstances, I think there's ample other things they can do with the property other than the commercial aspects that they're looking for here. I wanted to just make sure that the record was clear in terms of the conditional use of the property. It is, the standard is neighborhood serving retail service uses subject to the additional conditions below. Each cluster of neighborhood commercial development may be located no closer than 1 linear mile from other areas or clusters that are designated as neighborhood commercial or general commercial on the official zoning map as measured from the closest boundary of the applicable commercial zoning district. And there is, there's more than just go-kart sales. I think there's a hair salon. At a prior time, there was a little store right where Whitfield Road comes out onto Highway 20. There's a little commercial, there was a grocery store there. I think it's closed at the moment. There was a sub shop. I think there was a restaurant there at one time. That's the area that was designated basically to support the 1 mile restriction. And then you move down the road in a state residential, and there could be another one. And in my mind, that's what the county was thinking when they were allowing in these estate residential. So we're talking something bigger than rural residential. They're thinking leave it kind of uncommercialized in terms of activities. Although they do let the agricultural, aquacultural, and silviculture uses as noted as primary uses. Now these restrictions, I might add, they apply to all the properties out there. It's not, this isn't something that's unique to this. There's nothing unique about this parcel of property as opposed to others that are in the area that would be subject to the same restriction. So somebody else who owns on Highway 20, they're in that 1 mile, linear mile, no commercial development. It's what the county has chosen to apply. As I've stated, the applicant is not deprived of reasonable use of the property. In the application that was made to the zoning board, the question was, are the circumstances or conditions such that the strict application of the provisions of the Land Development Code would deprive the applicant of the reasonable use of such land or buildings? And the answer was, it is too large of a parcel to make it feasible as a single family residence due to the cost of property in the area. But what that doesn't take into account is that you could split it up into 5-acre tracts. You can put on there short-term vacation detached rental houses on there. You could develop it like that and stay within the code. There are other options that are available. In terms of unnecessary hardship, which is something I think both the code and Florida law, when it looks at variance requests, looks at is there proof of unnecessary hardship? And in response in the application, they wrote, the owner cannot develop her business without the variance. The owner is on a work visa from the United Kingdom and must start her business ASAP in order to retain her visa. Now, that's a hardship on the owner, but there's no hardship on the property itself. The fact that she needs this variance to start her business isn't a reason for a variance. It's unfortunate for her, but there are other parcels of property in Walton County, north of 331, that are zoned commercial where she could have this development. And I understand she owns the land and everything, but the fact that she's on a visa and she needs to start immediately and needs the variance isn't a reason to deviate from the code that was established.
Do you want to reread that about the visa?
Yeah, it's question number 8. Applicant question number 8, and the question is there proof of unnecessary hardship? And in parentheses it says, it is not sufficient proof of unnecessary hardship to show that greater profit would result if the variance was granted. The hardship cannot be established on this basis by one who purchases with or without knowledge of the restrictions. So even if you didn't know that the property was not zoned commercial and you couldn't develop a commercial business or a restaurant there, that's not proof of unnecessary hardship. If you could give me just a second. The Florida Supreme Court has said that a prerequisite to granting of a hardship zoning variance is the presence of an exceptional and unique hardship to the individual landowner, unique to that parcel and not shared by other property owners in the area. Florida courts have held that a legal hardship will be found to exist only in those cases where the property is virtually unusable or incapable of yielding a reasonable return when used pursuant to the applicable zoning regulations. And there's a case out there, it was a Burger King case, and they came to, was a city in South Florida asking for a variance, and they said, well, you know, the other fast food restaurants had a particular type of operation, and Burger King needed a variance so they could make theirs like the other, like McDonald's and Wendy's, or I don't know the name of the competitors, but the court in that case found that it can't be just you're economically a disadvantage. Burger King was like, well, they're all doing it, we want to do it, and we'll make less money if you don't let us do it. And they said that's not enough for a hardship. There's nothing unique. There's plenty of other uses under the code that the applicant could make use of her property if she wanted to develop it. So on question number 5, it said, what existing special circumstances or conditions are applicable to the land or buildings for which the variance is sought? Fully describe the unique circumstances. And it says, this is a site that is perfect for a recreational campground RV park with neighborhood serving retail service uses, as it has the largest parcel in the surrounding area, which gives it the adequate space and setbacks. You know, that's not a special circumstances. She meets the requirement of some of the primary uses. She cited a recreational campground. But what she's missing there is that the code does limit neighborhood serving commercial uses in a state residential, which is what this is. See if I have any others. I would like to, and I don't know if the board does this, but I actually submitted written objections, and are those entered into evidence, or can we have them?
Please, let's enter.
Yeah, we can obviously enter them. This is the packet with
Yes.
your letter.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we also submitted there was a letter submitted signed by David Clements, dated February 26th.
I believe I have that.
Yep, and then there was a letter submitted by Sharon Nickerson,
Yes, ma'am.
95, okay, great.
You want to just submit all of that as a composite, and we'll just make that,
Sure.
Public Exhibit 1.
What is it?
Public Exhibit 1.
Public, sure. So entered.
And then the only other issue that I wanted to raise, and it may have some relevance to the wedding venue and the teepee where it's located, and I understand the RV park, it's a primary use, and you had made it perfectly clear on the record that we're not here about the RV park tonight, we're here about the variance for the neighborhood commercial activity. But a portion portion of that property is designated as, it's not wetlands, as we all think of wetlands, but it's what's something called freshwater emergent wetlands. And I think it's governed by the Northwest Florida Water Management District. But we do have some concerns that the wedding venue may not be proper, sitting right where it is in those, what's on the map. If you look at it, it's, and I included a picture in the presentation towards the end. There's 9.23 acres of freshwater emergent wetlands there, and we had some concern that where the teepee, the 3,000 square foot teepee and its base is located, there may be some impact there. And I think in terms of where my client's property is located, it's just across Miley Road. They can see from the corner of their property up into the applicant's property, and there's some concern about water runoff once the development is started, and I think that might be for a different meeting, but I
That's
think.
water management, and I can assure you, they will pay attention to this project, and I can assure you, they will be there to make sure the permits and the engineer has been done. I can assure you that.
That was one that my clients wanted, just the burden on the infrastructure in the neighborhood in terms of this development having the parking lot up at the front and where the water runs, and laying over on top of that the freshwater emergent nature of it. Like I said, I don't think it's really directly on point in terms of the variance for neighborhood commercial, but we wanted to make the point in any event.
I can assure you, water management's probably done and been notified.
Okay. And then in terms of 10 and 11, it's her application, just real quick and then I'll wrap up, is the granting of this variance necessary for the reasonable use of the land. It says yes, for the commercial use of the land, the variance is necessary. But the correct answer is actually, there is reasonable use to be made of the property under the 5 listed primary uses and the other conditional uses that are available. It's unfortunate they don't meet the criteria for the conditional use of neighborhood commercial, but, and then the other one is this variance request the minimum that will accomplish the purpose of reasonable use of the land? And the answer was yes, and we feel like the answer is actually no, that a variance isn't necessary. And so in summary, my clients urge the board to deny the variance request, and Mr. Chairman, we do take thoughtfully your considerations about what might happen, but they are pretty opposed to letting the commercial element in when the code saw that it should be limited in terms of 1 mile.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and your
I
attention.
appreciate you helping me understand. Thank you. You did a good presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Who's next? You got something to say, Mr. Carpenter?
Yes, sir. As a planning director, I feel compelled to properly interpret the code. There were numerous misinterpretations of
Do
the
you
code in
want to
that
do that now, or
presentation.
you would like to wait until we get through with?
I can wait.
Let's
at your
wait.
request.
We already started the, listening to the general public, and I'd like to get their comments. So anyone else? State your name for the record, please.
Sue Malat. I live
Pardon me?
on Sue Malat. I live on Whitfield Road, and I went through her questionnaire. The attorney already hit on several of them.
Well, we don't want to get into a repeat of
We
here
don't
all
want
night,
to.
because
I
we got to move
completely agree
along.
with you
So
on
if
that.
you would, stick to new information.
Okay. I just wanted to say that on there it said that Eglin is to the west of us and the bay is to the south. And we have a little bit of commercial in that area already, less than a mile from where she is. And that's one of the reasons that we purchased where we did. It's a beautiful area right there. We don't have sidewalks. We all walk in the road with our dogs and our friends and our neighbors. And we like the area to stay. Basically, commercial-free right there. I do understand that there's a possibility that other things can come in that are allowed, but for this particular time, I think it's best that we don't try to do the variance. Let's see. There's other large tracts around there. I know that they were talking about, this is one of the biggest tracts there, and it is one of the biggest tracts there, but there's also other large tracts of land there that other things, can go up on. Do you want me to name all of them?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I want to be brief also. And we already had a traffic issue on Alaqua Road right there that runs along the side of the development. And we've already been before the Board of County Commissioners to try to get that solved, and they put signs there for us to direct traffic over to Alaqua Animal Refuge to try to keep too much traffic on there. They've posted signs down there, no turnaround, down at the end of Alaqua where it's close to the bay. They did dead-end signs right there. So we've already been through this once with traffic in the area, and we really don't want to go through it again. And it's helped. We have people down at the end of Alaqua that like to try to park there on Eglin property and use that dead end to put in kayaks and whatnot. So I just kind of feel like we're opening the door to have that issue happen all over again.
Okay.
So I am also speaking for Ida Busby, who can't be here tonight, and Vin Busby. They own
Okay.
property on Ruth Road down in there.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Who's next? Sure, come up, state your name for the record.
Thank you, County Commissioners, for your time. My name is James Wallace. I'm a retired Navy, somewhat disabled veteran. But I came here because I object. I just want to be specific to the codes. I don't see this as variance. What I see it is in direct conflict with the code, and I don't think it should even arrived here. And I'll be specific and to the point, so as not to waste your time. Under the application which they made they're requesting a variance, I just want to read specifically on the very next page on which the application was applied. That would be the 2.02.03. Anyway, subsection C, letter 3, accessory uses and structures allowed. I'll go down to 3, temporary seasonal use of recreational vehicles in this district on parcels that are 5 acres or greater in size, and it comes up later saying 5 acres or less in size, with or without primary residential structures, regardless of the structure there, subject to the following, and I'll skip A and B, it's right there. Well, no, I'll read it. The recreational vehicles must be owned by the property owner or an immediate family member. The property owner shall provide for lawful disposal of all solid waste and wastewater, including both gray and black. Anyway, commercial use of recreational vehicles in this district prohibited. It's not a variance, it's prohibited. Recreational vehicles or recreational vehicle parking spaces may not be rented or leased. The fact that this went through should not have even happened. We shouldn't even be here for this. And so I would like that it be denied, and I would like it to read for the record, the reason it's denied is because it says commercial use of recreational vehicles in this district is prohibited. Recreational vehicles or recreational vehicle parking spaces may not be rented or leased. It's pretty straightforward. It does not comply again. Conditional use is allowed. Letter C. Non-residential development shall be minor scale, less than 12,000 square feet of gross floor area and consistent with the characters of the existing neighborhood or business. It doesn't comply. And again, when we're talking about RV parking, it's pretty specific as the way it's written, I think, in the Agricultural Development Code. It's intended for people that have estates and or ranches that have their family members living on site can have RVs to live there. Maybe I'm not understanding, but I kind of understand the code. I believe I do. I studied it. I would agree. I don't represent the Navy. I'm retired Navy, yes. I live on Alaqua Drive. And as mentioned, we've already had many problems on the road, and it's just not a good location for it. They should just, I'm sorry, they bought it with an intended commercial use. but their application should be denied.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Gentleman with the cap on.
Charles Neese, out on a piece of, on 9 acres on Aliquid Road, and would like to speak against the issue because of the, I believe that it will cause undue drainage down that street, in which I own a 5-acre lake, that the runoff from the road runs into the lake. So I'm concerned about any activity other than what's already there that it would cause undue hardship to my $1 million pond. And that's all.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you coming up. Who's next?
Good evening. My name is Knox Millette. I live at 515 Whitfield. My wife previously spoke. My concern is, our concern is, and several of the neighbors have the same concern I do, is the infrastructure in the area just will not support that kind of influx of people. If we're talking about 54 RV sites, we're talking about, could be practically 200, 300 people.
We're not here to
understand,
discuss the RV part, though.
But what I'm saying is that it all should be considered in this, is that when, if this is approved, these people that are coming in to enjoy these weddings and things that are happening on site, they're going to be looking to get to the water. I mean, people don't come in this area and, they know that there's water around. They're going to try to enjoy it. Now, we talked about some of the traffic issues that already exist on Aliquid, and then we talked about the signage and those kinds of things. But that road has, at the end of it, it appears to be, it looks like a boat launch, but it's not a boat launch. In fact, it's not supposed to be used for that, but it is used for that. So if we pour more people into this community, they're going to be trying to use that road to get to the water. So we talked about the wastewater runoff. That's already an issue, and I think that is going to get worse if this development does happen. And I get it that I don't begrudge somebody from trying to do something with their property, but I think infrastructure needs to be considered, and I think it's sorely lacking now, and it will get worse if we do this. So
okay. Thank you, sir. Who's next?
Hi, good evening. My name is Amy Blizzard. I own a home in the area, and I'm in opposition of the proposed variance of use. I have owned a parcel out there since '94. My father was a real estate developer. He never went into an area to develop commercial where there was residential. We have our codes for a reason. I chose to come back to this area for a reason, for the quiet use of my home. And I'm concerned with the project, with the wedding venues, being that they're in teepees. They're not really soundproof. And I can appreciate what you had said about driving by and seeing something beautiful. Driving by is very different than sharing space. I live there. So just with the noise issue, the traffic coming off Highway 20, they've now increased the speed limit to 60 miles an hour. We have a considerable amount of traffic just from the workers who are staying in Blue Water Bay and Niceville. There's a considerable amount of traffic. now. So the number of times that I've almost been T-boned trying to make a left into Alaqua Drive, which is just east of their entrances. So I'm concerned about traffic issues when you're, you know, trying to find the coffee house, or you're pulling an RV or things like that. We don't have ample space, just as they said, at the end of Alaqua Drive. It's not a proper put-in or an area to even sit down and enjoy a picnic lunch, which if you're selling this as a parcel, you know, to enjoy, there's not proper access. We've addressed the water issues as a resident since I have lived there. That's been an issue with proper drainage. We flood out quite a bit. My road floods out all the time. So I'm certainly concerned. I own a business in Freeport. I work in Freeport proper because that's where businesses are located. I had looked at opening up space in my home. It's not zoned for that. So I chose to go to an area and open up a business where it's welcomed. Thank you.
I think we give Mr. Burgess the opportunity to come back before we continue. I hate to take 5 minutes in the middle of this. We don't care if he leaves. I'm concerned about Mr. Burgess. Do you need to take a break? Anybody else? Does anybody need to take a break? You do?
I'm okay.
I just hate to take a break in the middle of the issue that is being discussed. You didn't find Jeff out there, did you? Did he leave?
My question is,
Y'all can't discuss it. Please don't. Just go on first, like to be appealed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We're gonna take a break. Anyone else? You know, we try to give everybody the opportunity to speak. We don't mind if you're coming up, if you have something to add, but we really need to get this closed, but if you would.
This won't take long.
Go ahead.
My name is Dave McClellan. I live at 116 Miley Road, right next to the proposed pavilion. And I have a couple letters I'd like to give you all out. And everything's been said.
Open them up, give them to our secretary so we can enter them into evidence.
There's 2 letters, sir? Yes. Okay, we'll just make this public exhibit 2 composite.
Go ahead, sir.
But as living right next door to this place that proposed, it just doesn't make any, I just can't see anything good about it. That's all I could say. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for coming. I'm gonna give one more person. Anybody else? We'll give you 2. Now 3.
I'm not speaking against. Is that?
You're not speaking again?
That's correct. Should I come back later?
Come back later.
Okay.
Who's against? We're gonna give two people, and then we're gonna move on. All right, she is, and the guy in the back. Come on up, get behind, we'll fix and close this thing. Come on.
Hello.
State your-
My name's Becky Haney. I do live in the area. My husband and I have had property there for 35 years. Our primary home is there. I'm in opposition to this variance for a lot of the same reasons. I think it opens Pandora's box to what could come next, and it is a residential area. These are people that live there. These are our homes. We like it a residential area, so I am opposed to the variance.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Thank you for letting me speak. Warren Poston, I live on 810 Whitfield Road, or live at 810 Whitfield Road. And I'm also the owner of Warren's Metal Detectors at 4250 Highway 20 West. I just maybe reiterate a part about the 1 mile distance. I can understand why the original part of the writers put that in, is because the intensity of, generating more commercial activity in that area would definitely impact the residents living there. So I'm opposed to it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
No, ma'am, we're done. Who's here for, in favor of? Okay. Start with the guy with the coat. He came up. State your name for the record, please.
Thank you, Board. My name is Michael Scott Makeda, and my wife and I are one of the property owners that received the notification because we have a property that's within the 300-foot radius of the proposed variances.
WZEP?
I did own WZEP at one time.
It's been a long time. Go ahead.
My wife and I own 5 properties in Portland. 402 Whitfield, which is within the 300-foot radius. We also own 675 Whitfield. I own 73 Ruth Drive, which is just off Aliquot Drive on one of the canals. I also own 75 Aliquot Terrace and a parcel which the county has not yet assigned an address to, but it's parcel 13, 15, 20, 32, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 8, 0, 0, 10. And that property is located between 675 and 709 Whitfield Road. These are properties I paid in excess of $800,000 for on the record. They're probably valued at more than that on the market. I pay non-homestead taxes on all of those except my residence, which is $675. My wife Belinda and I are not specifically opposed to the Hollins proposal. Like all of the people who have spoken, we have concerns about commercial development in the area that we love and live. But I've spoken with the Hollins about my concerns, and personally, and they have alleviated my concerns. As long as the development is safe, clean, aesthetic, both Belinda and I think it would be a nice addition to Portland. Much better than 12,000 square foot grocery stores, or 3 of them. It's a better option for a lower use development of that 25 acres than what we could possibly have if the Hollins left and someone came and wanted to do something that was much more disturbing to the neighborhood. We first moved to Portland over 30 years ago. My wife taught school at Freeport for 20 years. Her family goes back in Walton County 150 years. My mother and other family members live in Hammock Bay, so we're local. And as you pointed out, I owned the radio station for quite a number of years here in Walton County. So with that said, I'd like to let the board know that we have no specific fear that the Hollins development will adversely affect our property values. And if it did, it would probably affect me more than most. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good to see you again. Who's next?
Good evening. My name is Chester Kroger. I am a resident on Whitfield Road. My wife and I currently live at 839 Whitfield. I am in favor of this project because I do believe that it would be an awesome asset to the neighborhood, and for all of the reasons stated by Mr. Makeda, although not with quite his voice, which happens to be a radio voice from back in the day, I would like to tell you that we are most definitely in favor. Furthermore, we have gotten to know the Hollins over the past few months. We attended a Christmas function which they graciously invited the neighborhood to. We also happened to be there for the opening of the coffee shop, and I've gotten to know them fairly well. And like Scott, I can tell you that these are quality people. They're not going to do anything there that would be bad for the neighborhood. They're living there. They are our neighbors, just like all of the fine people who have spoken here today. A difference of opinion, perhaps, but I don't want the board to think that this is anything much or more than, let's take a look at what could happen. And I think that you're spot on with what you've said. This is a much lower density project. It has much less impact than what could happen. And I think it's a matter of, you have to look in the long run. We're limiting something today, or you will be, that could have drastic effects on the neighborhood.
That's true. Who's next?
Hi, I'm Bennett Griffith, and I own a property directly east of the Hollins there. And as Ms. Baker said, I am the only neighbor. I share the only fence with this project of anybody in this room.
You on the south side?
I'm on the east side.
East side. Okay.
And just as you pointed out, this could be a much worse development than what she has planned. The wedding venue, I walk out my back door and I can literally see it. With proper fencing and some landscaping, it's going to be what it's going to be. I don't have a problem with it. It would be a benefit to the community, if anything.
Appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
How you doing? Thank you for allowing me to come up here.
State your name.
Oh, my name's Sam Pruitt. I just want to make clear that I am not a resident of the surrounding area, but I am a resident of Walton County. Been a resident for 2 years, retired Air Force, 21 years, and a personal friend of Kate Holland and Fred Holland. So a couple really good arguments that were made tonight by a lot of the residents. But one thing that I just want to allow you guys to understand is the arguments that you put forth are tremendous arguments that this is a very low impact commercial variance. The arguments made by the lawyers state that the variances must require a hardship, but if you read the variance order and I want to say it's the Florida Act of 1985, it talks about variances and allowing local governments to approve variances, that this is why we're here. We're here to subjugate a cafe, an RV park that can already go in there, which isn't even up for argument. But mainly we're here for a cafe. I think traveling back and forth between Eglin, because I was a security forces member, so I worked a lot out at Site C6. Traveling back and forth on the roads, yes, the roads are a lot of traffic, but there's not very many food venues around here. And I remember many lonely nights being out at satellite sites, sitting there staring in the darkness like, man, I wish I could go get some food. And the cafe is something that would allow the members of the military to to be able to partake in prior to going out to work. Another argument that I want to go for approval is that Eglin Air Force Base owns a lot of property around here. So the 1 mile commercial bubble that is in place, it really limits that area to commercialize anything. So by allowing Kate and Fred Holland to build up a small, family-owned, locally owned restaurant, I just don't see a real effect that it would have on the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in favor? Mr. Carpenter?
Matt Carpenter for the Planning Department. I wanted to clarify some things about and some of the statements that were made earlier. This proposed use is an allowable use. While we're not here to discuss the RV park is clearly an allowable use, and it doesn't require the approval of this particular board, and can be approved on this site. In fact, the RV park can be approved at a much greater scale on this 25-acre site, given the environmental constraints, the traffic impacts, and those other infrastructure-related things that would have to be considered. With regard to the comments about RVs being prohibited under Section C of the estate residential category, they absolutely are prohibited, with the exception of those circumstances where someone would have a parcel without an approved development order for an RV park. There are very limited circumstances where you could have an RV on this property, and it does prohibit renting the RV. However, if you go through the development order process for an RV park, you can absolutely have as many as our development standards would allow you to create. We're looking at this as a reasonably sized RV park with some associated uses, and those associated neighborhood commercial uses would be allowable as a conditional use if approved by this particular board. But there is one further condition, and that's that they be located at least 1 mile from the nearest commercial zoning district. There is a commercial zoning district about 3/10 of a mile from this particular site. It contains a number of businesses, some of which have been mentioned by the applicants, some mentioned by other speakers at the podium. Doesn't require one or more businesses, it just requires that it be commercially zoned, and it is commercially zoned. There is a large amount of federal government-owned property around here, which does limit the ability to place neighborhood commercial or other commercial uses within that 1 mile proximity. And that 1 mile distance is intended to prohibit continuous strip development along Highway 20. It is not intended to be an absolute circumstance, and it is a part of the Land Development Code that is available to request a variance. With regard to how much can be developed on this particular site, within the list of primary uses, 25% of this site can be covered by those allowable uses. Not just a 12,000 square foot Dollar General. Potentially it could be up to 272,000 square feet of allowable use, allowable primary use. We looked at this particular development as a very low intense use of the potential of this particular property. And this is why we suggested this particular avenue for this applicant to pursue in hopes of obtaining approval to do development, the lower scale development that they could do compared to some other particular developments. And I will tell you that we have lots of developers looking for large sites for large RV parks, and this site has come up in their inquiries outside of this particular application. with regard to the neighborhood commercial prohibition of outdoor music, there is not one in this land use district. In the neighborhood commercial land use district, there is a prohibition about outdoor music. So I just wanted to clarify that, but this particular site could have a much greater intensive use that would create much more traffic, much more noise than what is proposed here, and we believe that it's a reasonable use of this particular site. This board also does have the opportunity to put a limit on the variance that they're seeking. You could actually condition that variance to be limited to this very proposed development. You could condition this variance not to run with the land, if that be your choice, as a further way of potentially limiting what could happen in the future. And if somebody wanted to do something different, they'd have to come back through the same process to seek their own variance. But in this particular case, we feel like this would be a reasonable use of this particular land and a much less intensive use and much less burdensome use on the area than which is being proposed than what could potentially be allowed here without a variance.
You mentioned about the noise is not specifically prohibited, but a wedding venue would, at least most of the weddings that I've attended, they do put off a considerable amount of noise, and a lot of people had voiced opposition to that noise being a nuisance to the neighborhood. I know in South Walton, there's a lot of opposition to wedding venues popping up in neighborhood areas. Even though there may not be anything specifically restricting the noise, would us granting a variance for a wedding venue also be granting them the ability to create that noise nuisance?
They would still be subject to a noise ordinance like any other particular use would be. It's just not specifically prohibited in the land use district as was stated by the first speaker.
Y'all made it, look, this is only one variance. Now, we need to move along now, so let's move along.
I was
Go
gonna
ahead.
Ask a question about the watershed. We had lots of questions about
There's
the
a water
watershed.
management, take
There's
care of the
water
water. Go ahead and answer.
That's it. The county regulations are gonna prevent any water from leaving the property.
Absolutely. The pre and post development runoff, the post development runoff is not allowed to exceed the pre development runoff. They are required to contain whatever stormwater that is created by their proposed development on their site for a 25-year storm in this particular area. The proposed locations on this site do not impact any wetlands as identified on their survey. And although the entire development order is not subject of tonight's action, we don't see any particular environmental concern at all. They properly address stormwater as required by the Land Development Code.
This site is over 6 acres. If over 6 acres, it requires a different Northwest Florida permit. It's not just a she cannot just, Ms. Baker cannot self-certify it. It's got to be presented to Water Management. Water Management will review it, and they would, I can assure you, they would take care of the runoff. They get, and DEP will be, have to sign off of it too if it's over 6 acres. Go ahead.
Quick question.
Quick.
Mr. Carpenter. Again, back to the fundamental issue, the commercial parcel in question that's only 0.3 of a mile away. It's very small, and it's surrounded by estate residential. Was that potentially grandfathered in as an existing use when the flume was adopted?
I believe there was some commercial use there before the comprehensive plan was adopted in 1996.
Okay.
There's been some additional commercial use there, but that land use category has been in place for a number of years.
And for the requirement, again, no closer than 1 mile of either neighborhood commercial or general commercial, this being general commercial completely surrounded by estate residential, and maybe Renee or Ms. Baker, you mentioned one other. Is it actually designated within our 1 mile? And I'm looking at the
It's
flume.
at the intersection. There's the mini stories there on the left. There's that intersection.
There's a large red.
Okay, all right, and that's so, in the color coding, all right, so it is within, but
Site
on-
C6 Road.
okay, but on the outskirts of the 1 mile limit.
area right here is commercial as well.
Okay,
This is zone commercial, and it's right, that's the 1 mile right there, approximately, so you have that.
yes, ma'am, okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carver, appreciate it. Ms. Baker, you want to come back before the board? She's be glad to come up and speak. I mean, this
I
is
think
your-
everything is pretty well covered. I mean, it's a tremendous point that this is such a low-intensity project, because the Hollands have every right to fully develop the RV park to the maximum extent, but they want to keep this low intensity, as I described, with all the setbacks, with the impervious surface ratio being half of what it has to be. You're absolutely correct. Water Management District is already looking at this project. I'm communicating with them and answering their questions, and we're gonna make sure it's right. The 1 mile, as the county has stated, I mean, that's just intended that's intended to prevent strip development. And as you can see for miles, this Eglin Air Force Base, so it's not like you're gonna have pop-ups of commercial. This is a unique property. I think this is a great opportunity right now to limit commercial, just like the code wants to do in this area, to very low-intensity development.
If the variance, should the variance get, okay, let me rephrase that. Can I believe that the presentation tonight is that this 24 acres will be this use only, and you have no problem in limiting that property for this use?
That is my understanding. If you want to ask that question directly to the owner.
I do.
Okay.
We can ask that now. You don't have to sit down, Ms. Baker. You can
Okay.
finish your, but I would like to ask you, you have 24 acres.
Yep.
Is the use that you're proposing tonight, do you have a problem us limiting that to this?
No, it's my family home. I've moved here from England, and I've brought my 2-year-old, my 6-year-old, me and my husband. We've no family in America, and we picked Freeport. My husband lived in our 16th century farmhouse in England for 30 years.
So you have no problem in limiting your property to this use?
No, we've come here to make it home. We want we want to open the gates to the community. We want people to be able to holiday here and glamp here, and it be something beautiful. If we limit that as the development that we've put in, then that's how we'll keep it, and that's how we'll maintain it.
And you do understand that would run in perpetuity now and even in potentially subsequent owners?
He's just saying that if you sold the property, whoever they sold it to, they would have to abide by the same development.
We don't intend to sell the property. It took me 6 years to find it, so yeah, I won't be selling the property.
Okay, Ms. Baker, go ahead.
I think the only other thing I had was about noise. She has time limits on, things. As far as the RV park, she's got rules there put together about quiet times. There'll be a shut-off time for weddings. If you want to talk more directly about that to her, you can.
Sure, let's do that while that was a concern. Ma'am, come back up, please. Address the noise issue. You heard your neighbors complain about your noise potential. You want to enter that into evidence?
Please, yeah.
Mr. Dykes?
We'll make this applicant's exhibit 2.
Okay. Go ahead. Address the noise issue.
So, I was aware of the issues raised by the neighbours before I came, so I opened the coffee trailer on Sunday to the community so that I could discuss things. People came in favour, but none of the people not in favour came to attend. I've wrote rules out already for the RV park, for the wedding venue. It's my home. I have a 2-year-old, I have a 6-year-old. We're not bringing Glastonbury to Freeport for a rave. Do you know, there will be rules, and there will be quiet times, and there will be places you can and can't park, and the place will be kept immaculate. It's our home. We're going to keep home separate, but we're going to work there as well. what we intend with the teepees is they're beautiful. I want to open them to the community. In England, I do a Santa's grotto, like a Father Christmas meet, Santa Claus. I do 3,000 children through that grotto every year, and they love it. I do Easter egg hunts. I do Halloween parties. We don't make loads of noise. Truly, there'll be children there that'll be playing and having fun, and there will be a noise level, but it will not affect the residents, and if it did, it would most definitely affect myself, because I live next door. My husband has brought we had a farm at home. My husband he can fix anything. We've brought 2 40-foot and 2 20-foot containers full of all his tools and equipment and diggers, and the place will be immaculate. We're both perfectionists. It will be brilliant. I want people to come and eat nice food and enjoy the surrounding area. I don't intend, and my intention was never to upset this community. I've had the coffee trailer open since Monday. I opened from 6 o'clock till 4. I've met a couple of hundred residents now, from Hammock Bay to Niceville to wherever, Destin, and they can't believe the trailer. I've imported it from England. It's beautiful. I want the place to be lovely, and I want people, even if they were against it, to come and have dinner there. You know, my intention isn't to upset anybody. We've put the plan together to really suit everyone, and I'm hoping that you agree, really. The pack that I've given you there is the rules that I've stated, but there's also some pictures of my actual teepees, because they are quite bespoke, just to give you an idea of what they are. I had a wedding venue in England for 6 years at my own farm, which was 70 acres, and I've never, ever had one complaint about noise.
Okay, thank you very much. If nothing else, do you have anything else to add, Ms. Baker? We fix and close this. Close the public discussion.
Motion to close the public discussion.
Charlie made the motion, second.
Second.
All in favor, aye? Aye. Motion to approve.
Now, this is, to be clear, this is just on the variance in the second.
It's on the variance. We got another hour to
Is
go.
the wedding venue considered part of the commercial variance, or is it just for the cafe?
What we're doing here, we are taking granting the variance that a commercial use can be allowed within a third of a mile. This is a distance variance. It says it can't have a commercial use a mile apart. Well, because there's a commercial use that's a third mile, 1/3 of a mile, we have to grant a variance on we're allowing them to have a commercial use within a third of a mile of another commercial use. It's the distance. It has nothing to do with
Mac addressed, he said that we could get very specific about the pieces and parts of it, and I want to
Okay,
make sure.
okay, but that's coming up next. We got A and B here.
Okay.
We got to do the distance before we get into the issues, before we grant a variance on the, we got to have another hearing. we're gonna have another discussion. This is the distance.
As the chairman said, this is just to, you don't get to step 2 unless they get past step 1.
Right.
And step 2 is gonna deal with allowing the cafe and those other uses that have not, that they discussed earlier, that generally aren't listed in the code to be allowed.
I guess the thing that I've been struggling with is that the most of the small neighborhood groceries that I'm familiar with all over the country typically are the cafe and the coffee shop.
That's not our discussion. The discussion is, are you gonna
be allowable under the?
But listen, Jeff, we've got to readdress the issues that you have issues with. We got to grant this variance or deny the variance. If we deny the variance at the distance, then we're not going to continue any other discussion. If we grant the variance that another commercial use can be within a third of a mile, then we got to have another discussion about the concerns that you have. But we can't discuss that until we deal with this distance issue.
Okay.
Then we can discuss that. We have a motion to approve the variance for the distance. This is the distance that they can have another commercial use within a third of a mile of another commercial.
I make a motion that we approve the variance for a commercial use within the 1 distance mile criteria on this project.
We have a motion, a second.
I'll second.
You gonna second it? I am. Are you really? Good deal. Now, a motion and a second. Any discussion?
So the board and the record's clear, you know, if you'll establish, you know, as a criteria of the things that you noticed factually that were presented, that give you the reason, you know, the hardship, the circumstances.
That's what you're here for. We have a motion and a second. That's your job. You interpret what we do. Motion and second discussion.
I will speak to Hayward's thing. I think there's a hardship established because of the proximity of Eglin to the property. I think there's the size of it in combination with it, the size of the parcel being a larger parcel, and there's not as many of them around, trying to keep that as a larger parcel contiguous. The parcel that is commercial appears to be a grandfathered pre-zoning use, where it was just kind of grandfathered in. It's a very small node as opposed to like the typical more square nodes that the county had assigned in other places. So I'm thinking that's my reasoning for a hardship there. And this is speaking specifically to the 1 mile distance factor.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other comments? Have a motion, second, all in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Okay, the variance for the distance relief of the 1 mile has been approved. I believe that the discussion has already been about the issues that commercial use. And Lord knows I don't want to take we need to have, I'm going to give anyone else the opportunity to speak briefly. Because now then we can go ahead and grant the variance for the wedding and the cafe. Is anyone else has anything else to say?
Right.
I don't feel it's a variance.
Okay.
So the next.
I live on Alpha Drive, my wife and I. Your safety concerns. Please.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
So, I'm sorry, so what he presented is just a copy of the code with no. That's fine, sir. So we'll make that public. I think we're at 3, correct?
Ma'am, come on up.
Okay.
Come on up. You don't need legal counsel. You can do this by yourself.
Yeah, I can. I live right behind the venue.
Okay.
So now
I'm sorry, ma'am.
you
What's
are
your
going to
name?
let
State your name for your
Sonia
record.
Clements, 95 Miley Road. So now you're going to grant her commercial, basically commercial property. So now you've opened the gate, and if I come to you and I say, hey, I want a little commercial venue too, I could have a baby teepee. Are you going to grant me that? I have almost 20 acres behind her 25 acres. So would you allow me and my mother to have a commercial venue there?
Man, we can't answer that. We'd have to.
But
look at the
I'm just
facts.
saying how you're opening, you
Wait a
are
minute.
opening the door for
Ma'am?
everybody to ask for commercial.
Ma'am, we'll be glad to look at any issue that you want to bring
But
before us.
that's what I'm asking, that's it.
Just because the granting of one variance does not guarantee granting of the other, but we will
That's
look
what
at
I
it.
mean, but now, are
Present it
you
to
really
us.
being fair to all the other 100 neighbors?
We appreciate you
Thank
coming
you.
up. Yes, ma'am.
While I'm standing here on the issue of the wedding venue, and I know you have touched on this, and I think that's what's coming up is the discussion about the wedding. A wedding venue is not one of the commercial allowable uses in neighborhoods serving residential or neighborhood commercial. So a wedding venue is not one of the permitted uses. And then I will just adopt all of the arguments I made earlier. I think they apply equally to this discussion. So I'll rely on all of those arguments.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? You done have been up here twice, you're not coming back. Sit down. Yes, ma'am, you come up.
My name is Cynthia Johnson. I've been in Portland many, many years. The only question I have about any of this, I feel like she can do whatever she wants with the property, but I worry about the sewage system. We don't have a sewage system in Portland. We have water, but we don't have sewage. Now, you open a cafe and you make 500 or 5,000, how many square feet? And a cafe and a coffee thing, and you have a big sewer system. Well, we've got the bay, where we have all the houses around the bay. You've got all that around here.
There is a Department of Health that would take and review this process and this permit. If it happens, we don't know if it's gonna happen yet, but if it does, it's like water management. They would definitely have to have the approval for anything else to occur.
Right,
They're
once
not
it gets
gonna-
in.
The sewage system that's there is not gonna be adequate to
Of course
support
not.
it, and they are definitely will have to meet the terms of the.
Right, but
Florida
do they ever
Department.
come back and check it?
Yes, trust me, I had a mobile home park, I can assure you, they come on
They hadn't done
a
a very good
commercial
job on the
use,
bay,
they
is
come
all I'm
on a
gonna
yearly
tell you.
basis and tell me everything I was doing wrong, so I can assure you they will.
Well, you know our problem between Freeport and Portland, the landfill thing, which percolates down into the
Right.
groundwater. Well, you know, anyway, we see how that went. So, you know, I don't want to be disrespectful, but I have a very low opinion of what the county will do for the public.
This is more of a state, it's
I know,
environmental.
it's one of the handoff things, I understand that.
Okay, thank you, ma'am, glad you got the opportunity to speak. Anyone else? One more. Scott, do you want to add anything?
I knew Don Wiley Road, and I've asked a lot of neighbors if they knew Don. We used to call him the mayor of Portland when he called and appeared on our radio talk show. He was quite a guy.
Motion, wait a minute.
Yeah, I would ask Renee to come up and provide
Renee?
the criteria for what what the board's considering now. I believe there's 3 criteria.
Yes, sir, that's correct. There are 3 criteria. The first is the adequate size of the parcel. I think we've been over that over and over. We have a 25-acre site here, and as long as we're meeting floor area ratio and impervious surface and not going over the 12,000 square feet allowance, it meets that condition. The site also relates to streets and highways adequate in width and degree. Improvement to handle the quality kind of vehicle or traffic that would be generated by the proposed use. Well, we're on Highway 20, so I do believe we've got adequate access to this parcel.
But however, with it being on Highway 20, you will have to have a DOT permit, and they will have to take and approve the engineering.
And yes, sir, and we've already actually got that, I believe. It's approved. We got that in yesterday.
Right.
Yes, sir. And the third thing is that any negative impacts of the proposed use on adjacent properties and on public can be mitigated through the application on the stated conditions, other applicable land development code standards, or other reasonable conditions. And what I stated here is that this property is well big enough to have additional buffers if we want to place additional buffers. We've already got a lot of native vegetation that's already there. The applicant stated as part of the technical review process they're willing to put in additional landscaping. Basically, they're trying to do anything that they can to please the neighborhood as far as buffering this project and keeping it low key. So it's staff's opinion this meets the land development code for the conditional use. If there's anything else I can answer for the board, I'd be glad to.
We're good, thank you. Ms. Baker, you have the final say.
I believe Renee said it all, but if there are any other conditions you want to put on it about landscaping or whatever, just let us know.
We're gonna leave that up to you, Renee. Okay?
Thank you.
Motion to close the public discussion.
Make a motion to close the public discussion.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Need a motion? Ms. Waterman, whether you want to be the first one, make a motion? Motion to approve, motion to deny, I ain't calling you out, just trying to make you feel at home. I need a motion.
I make a motion for approval
Well,
for
the motion
the
to
conditional
approve.
use.
Would you like to limit it to this specific development?
Pardon me if I might amend my motion. I would like to make a motion to approve the conditional use and limit it to this amendment and to this parcel as the development is presented and agreed to by the owner.
Just to be clear, I think that the variance should run with the land. that if they sell it, that it needs to continue to use, because if you build that business and then you say, no, you can't have it, so it's gonna be to the land to continue, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Have a motion, a second,
I'll second
Ms. Waterman seconded. We'll start, since you made the motion, discussion.
Okay. Yes, I do believe that the code is well written, and I commend county staff for even making the recent revisions that they have. But I don't believe listed uses are all encompassing, that if you can have a bait and tackle shop, I believe you can have a coffee shop. If you can have a grocery store, I believe you can have a small restaurant. We clearly do not exceed the allowable square footages for these type usages. And, you know, again, a kennel full of barking dogs versus a coffee shop, I don't think there's anything unharmonious about this.
I agree. Charlie?
I think it's far less of an impact than it possibly can be going forward. It's keeping it to a very small development where it could be, as Max said, at one point, like 200,000 square feet.
270,000 square feet of
Which
commercial
would be
use.
just
Will be a big old shopping center.
massive
And then you have a,
impact to the community. And while I understand that they would like it not to change at all,
it's not.
it's going to change some. And I think this would be the better of a lot of the evils that it could be. It could be far, far worse. And with this, I think it's going to end up being ultimately better. And I reiterate a lot of what Mr. Burgess was saying with, I think it's very harmonious with the neighborhood with regard to what's there and what's allowed anyway.
Yeah, my concern extends not to the small cafe, but to the wedding venue use and the short-term visitors that would accumulate for that, and any music and whatnot. And so, as a large parcel horse farm owner in the Funiac, if somebody were to set up a similar venue adjacent to my property, I would be extremely opposed to that type of a wedding venue. And we've seen it down here at the beach where people have tried it, and that is just an extremely incompatible use with a neighborhood community when you have the noise and the traffic for those events every weekend, and it's very disturbing when you need that quiet time to recharge your batteries.
I would say like the RV park is allowed. I mean, like by Max's thing, and RV parks are kind of.
But I'm not questioning the RV park.
Yeah, I know, but I mean like that same type activity goes on at an RV park. I mean,
what
like
Charlie's saying is you could have 1,000 RVs there, she's limited to 55 to have a wedding venue. So not only that, she could have the RV park along with a 12,000 square foot shopping store.
Your
So-
RV people
So
are
when you start talking about people,
similar.
when you start talking about people on a wedding venue, they're there for a short period of time and they're gone. You have a grocery store that's open, could be open 24 hours a day. And then you have 1,000 other, and it's, I think that's what Charlie's saying, is that we understand the concern, but when you look at it limiting the use, and she's willing to do that by deed, and she's willing to live there. I mean, I can't, I'd rather have this next to me to live with than to have a shopping center with 1,000 RV parks coming in and out all times of day with their motors and their vehicles, and limited to 55, for Pete's sake.
Is that what the limit is
Yeah.
now, the spaces?
Yes.
55?
That's what's on the proposed plans, yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. My concern is the landscape buffer. I think along Highway 20, on the west side of 20, you've got Eglin, which I don't think they're really concerned whether or not you have a landscape buffer or not. But I think the other three sides of your property, I think might help some of the neighbors if the landscape buffer was thick enough that A, it would knock down some of the sound, and B, prevent the visual from it. I think you need the visual. If it was my business, I would want the visual along Highway 20 because I'd want the interest created by people seeing it driving down the road. But I think the rest of the property owners or the adjacent fences, I think you need very thick landscape buffer.
She's willing to have already, I think, a minimum, I think is 100 and not open it back up, it was in excess of 100 and some odd feet on the buffers, and on the south side it was 1,000 feet. And then on one side of it, she had the wetlands that is definitely going to serve as a buffer, and she's going to have the holding pond she got to build that is going to have a dam on it that is going to block the view. I mean, I think the landscape buffer has already pretty well been determined by her presentation and the documents that she presented and evidence that has it on it, that they said is going to adopt this into their property. Whereas again, if you go to a commercial use, the landscape buffer, I believe, is going to be 20 feet. And they have 100 something feet as a minimum on one side. So I think she's pretty well addressing the buffer. More so than she would have to if she allows a commercial use or enlarge her RV park, because, you know, you get in swapping wetland, what do you call it, mitigation? Or you can swap mitigate. You can swap the wetlands and fill in some more, like they do down in South Walton. And she ain't proposing that. So I think she's covered the buffers. And I think she's willing to work with the neighbors, and I think she's willing to work with the planning department. If that's something, we're hoping that the neighbors leave here not mad at us and not mad at her, and that they can sit down and work these problems out. Maybe she can have a community meeting and work on some landscape. Mr. Anderson?
I've lived in a lot of RV parks. I lived in one that had about 200 RVs in there. Just looking over the rules of this right here, there was none down there in St. Pete where I live. We had to be union trailer and hush time at 10 o'clock or whatever. So I think some of the rules she's got in place, well, that's restricting her to what she's already recommended she was gonna do. But, I know you get 400 RVs in one place right there, and no time limits, and they can get pretty crazy.
And they start drinking beer around the campfire.
Yes, sir. It's your restrictions on that.
Mr. Waterman, what do you think?
Well, being a livestock owner, my one concern is on Highway 20 pulling in RVs, if there's a way to get them off of 20 before they try to make a turn, because I can't tell you about how many times I've almost been rear-ended pulling a livestock trailer. So I would hope that that's part of the planning too, is getting them in and out of there safely.
We have a motion to approve. We have a second. All in favor, aye? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Everyone approved except Mr. Jeff, he opposed. You received your variance on the distance, you received your variance for your wedding venue and your cafe. We hope that you can work with the community and come in harmony where everybody will be happy. You have 30 days after I sign the final order to file and appeal in the circuit court, and we appreciate y'all coming. No. It's good to see you. I thought you, yes, we're gonna take a break. State your name for the record.
Glad to. My name's Ted Darby. I'm from Dallas, Texas, and I'm a future resident.
Future.
And that's a summary I gave the young lady to kind of what I'm going to talk about. Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight and give you a brief overview of why I'm looking for a variance on the house at 56 Azalea. I've sat in your position in another city many years ago, so and I appreciate what you're doing, so I'm going to be very brief and to the point. I got 5 points. My family's been coming down to this area for almost 20 years, and the reason for that is when I was stationed at Cape Canaveral, Cape Kennedy, that is where I met my wife to be. We got married in Florida, so Florida's special to us, and we left Florida to go ahead and start our professional career and start a family. That was point one. Second point, once we got to where we could have a real family vacation, meaning we could afford it, we returned to Florida, and since then we've been coming to Walton County since the middle part of the 90s. We've been everywhere from rosemary to watercolor and everything in between as our family grew. Our family consists of 3 daughters, 6 grandchildren, and 2 nephews who we adopted, and now their family's part of our overall unit. Point 3, it was our dream to have a beach house in this area, one large enough to accommodate our whole family of 6 families, basically anywhere from 14 to 16 individuals at a given point in time. And most important, a place where we could retire once I stopped working. My wife died, so anyhow, get past that. After she died, we came together as a family unit and stay on track to find a house down here. So that's what we did this past year. Bought a house at 56 Azalea, with the intent to improve it by adding 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, a game room, and a TV room, while staying within the existing footprint of the original structure. Careful consideration was given to the ample parking in coordination with what we were trying to do, and we can accommodate 6 cars with the garage units and surface parking. The finished product will only be 2 stories high. It's part of it's 2 stories right now. We just want to move it on over the garage and make the additions. I'm seeking this variance so we can have a house that I can come retire, the families can come to. And last point, since we secured this property, I have improved it downstairs. I have removed personally all the overgrown brushes, the dead trees, the dead plants, and all the trash, so that the remaining 13 oak trees can continue to grow and thrive. To me, that's keeping within the tradition of what I first saw when I saw Old Sea Grove. There's beautiful oak trees, all the native plants, and everything else. So a place for all my family, just not part of it. That's it. I appreciate your time. Do you have any questions, sir?
What are you asking for?
A variance from the setback, as stipulated right there.
On the front, you asking on, on the north side, you asking for a 8-foot setback?
Right, if you look at
8-foot variance?
the schematic right here on the last page, you can see how there's a weird line, how it cuts across it diagonally.
Is the house already there?
Oh, the house has been there since 1983 and was built to the specifications at that point in time.
And you building within that footprint?
I'm going to build within that footprint.
You're not adding any concrete?
No concrete's being added.
In other words, this is already encroaching into the setback.
Pardon?
This house encroaches into the setback?
From what I understand, they did not renew the restrictions when the house was built in 1983, and so everything reverted back to 1950. So then I'm in violation, but what's built is grandfathered, but I can't go up over it without the variance. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay.
What you're asking for is that there's a structure that you're asking for 8 feet variance on one side and 4 feet on the other, and the bottom floor is there, the first floor, and you're going to add to it, and you're not changing anything on the bottom.
The footprint's staying exactly the same.
But you got to ask us because you added the 2-story.
Correct. We're adding 1 story above the garage and the kitchen.
So the idea is he's enlarging a non-conforming structure. Obviously, he's grandfathered in, so since he's going up, even though he'll be within the footprint, that's why he's here tonight. He has to get the variance because he's adding onto the structure vertically, even though he's not going outward.
But it's already there. We don't. Technically.
Right. The part that's there, he's not getting a variance for. It's the new stuff that he wants to.
We need to go ahead and grant him the variance on the front on what's there. You
No.
can't grant. You can't grant him. Wait a minute.
No, what's there is there. The only reason he's here tonight is because the new stuff that he wants to put on top would be inside those setbacks. He could build on top of it and not be within the setbacks.
Well, hang on a minute. The house was built in 1983. prior to any setbacks, correct? Therefore, it's grandfathered in, and he doesn't have to get a variance to come into compliance, right?
Correct. So the bottom structure is,
I don't know that that code, when it was built, however, it's non-conforming. At this time, we need current county setbacks. You would have to.
What I'm trying to, Mike, help me out here. The house was built prior to the setbacks, correct?
Yes, sir. The 92 comprehensive plan was approved. The county commission declared all existing residential structures as conforming structures.
But now,
This there now is conforming.
but if the storm comes by and blows it away, he can't build it back in the footprint.
He would be required to build back to the
Setback.
county setback.
But now this don't make sense. Now listen, help me understand this. What you're saying is the first floor, if we don't address it tonight, he can't build back to the variance, but the second floor he can because we granted him a variance. Right?
That seems kind of foolish, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. So we need to just go ahead and give him a variance on
Well,
everything that's there. 'Cause
he's
you can't
asking-
grant a variance on the upper floor.
He's asking to create a nonconformity that is outside of the conforming determination that the county made in 1996 when we developed or adopted the comprehensive plan. Technically, if that were destroyed, he would not be able to go back into that same footprint.
But he could on the second floor.
I think the proper course of action, and I think according to the request, he's asking for a reduced front setback.
Right.
That would apply to the ground floor also.
Right.
In the event that it was destroyed.
Right. That makes sense.
But the reason is, he's wanting to add on
I agree with that.
to something that would not be conforming.
And I agree with that.
But the
we-
footprint is there now.
Yes.
Footprint is there now, and that is grandfathered in. If it was
Right.
destroyed by more than 50%, he would be required to meet the current 20-foot front setback.
Right. Everybody good?
What you're saying is if we approve this variance tonight, then he can rebuild in the future if he needs it.
Yes.
But they'll include the ground floor.
Yes.
I believe it's two aspects, actually, that he can, one, rebuild in the event of just over 50% destruction, and two, at present, build the second story on the footprint that's there.
Yeah.
It allows him to build his current second story construction.
And it's common sense.
Were you aware of this during the design process, or did this come up when you submitted for a permit for the remodel?
Came up when submitted for the permit, well, we couldn't submit for the permit for the remodel because they pointed it out to us.
In planning?
Right, and when I bought the house, I got the survey, took a look at that and everything, the title company was fine with it, and everybody was fine with it. I did my due diligence, going around for 2 days, looking at all the homes and everything, measured it off, had the plat maps, looked at everything. I thought I was good to go.
Well, I've been there before as an architect and gotten to the planning department and had a project turned around. So you've spent how many months, would you say, working on these floor plans?
I closed on this last May 2018.
I guess one of the things that concerns me is that it's now a 6-bedroom home, and there's one of the parking bays inside the garage is a laundry room. So you only have one car parking in the garage, and then you have 6 total bedrooms, so you actually need 5 parking spaces, none of which can be outside of the property lines.
Correct.
So I'm wondering if the planning department has addressed that issue with the parking, or if they stopped after the issue came up about the adding on to the non-conforming structure.
Why don't we ask Landon when we get there?
Pardon?
Sorry, my name's Matt Parenzen, and I was just coming up to
Has
clarify.
anybody addressed the parking with you?
Not specifically, but I wanted to mention that the laundry room is inside the home, and so both garages are free
Okay.
for
I
car
saw
parking.
in the existing floor plan that
That might be the as-built of the, well, I'm not sure what it is that you got in front of you.
Yeah, page A 1.1 shows the existing first floor plan, and there's a laundry room taking up the parking space in the garage. Is that there?
We're gonna be adding 2 bedrooms upstairs, and that other one is a game room.
But it has a bathroom and a closet.
Well, it's got a bathroom, so.
It's a bedroom.
Okay.
Why don't we ask Vivian, she gets something?
Okay. Is the laundry room in the garage, or has it been removed?
I think the question should be, is there adequate parking to be cut?
As presented, there is not adequate parking. All right, I need to ask Vivian about the parking.
Okay.
Anybody else want to ask Stephanie or?
We'll give you a chance to come back once we get everything else figured out.
Okay.
Just sit down, be patient.
Okay, thank you.
Vivian, how you doing tonight? I wish you'd do that quietly. You usually make all kinds of noise saying that. Just irritating.
Good evening.
You're smiling tonight, Vivian.
I am.
I think you need to address Jeff's concerns, because he's got a concern.
Yeah, I mean, basically, they're requesting this prior to submitting it to the planning department for review. It would have to meet all of the parking requirements. So this is not something that we have reviewed yet. Before they went too far along, they wanted to, seek a variance to see if they could get the addition, but they will need to meet all the parking requirements.
Okay. I'm comfortable with that.
Can I give you a presentation, please?
Presentation, well,
What do you think about it, Vivian?
what I think, first of all, just to let you know, there is a letter in your packet that, from the neighbor who is, has no concerns about this and has detailed the work that they have done on the property to clean it up and so forth. So you have one letter, not of opposition, but in support of. And I think the only thing, like I say, staff has no opposition or to granting the variance, should you find it to be a hardship. Just if it is destroyed, say they build the addition and it is destroyed by more than 50%, you can make this so that it runs with the current structure, so that if such a tragedy occurred, they could come back and they would be able to meet the current county setbacks, not be able to rebuild to the variance that you're giving them tonight.
Right. Okay.
Is that a request by the county?
Yes.
Well, that's a suggestion.
Okay.
That's a common sense. We're not gonna
And then, do you want to introduce the staff report
Yes.
and the exhibits? Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, if you'll accept, if she wants to introduce the staff report and the
So
exhibits.
Thank you, Vivian. Do you have anything else to add? What's the uniform? What's your uniform, your shirt? I can't see that far.
It's the Marine Corps Scholarship Foundation.
It's a what?
The Marine Corps Scholarship Foundation, I serve on the national committee.
Okay,
I have
good deal.
a question for him. In several variances back that we had somebody that had requested a variance for the structure, and then subsequently had to come back again to address parking in a separate variance after the fact to add to the first variance. Would you like some more time to see if you need anything different for your parking?
I think we'll be able to work with the young lady's suggestion, and we will be able to meet the parking requirements.
Okay.
It's a fairly good-sized lot,
Okay.
and try to do it without taking down an oak tree, because they're kind of near and dear to me.
Okay.
You good?
That's what I want to know.
Do you have anything final to say?
I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you very much. We lost our audience here, but, thank you very much.
Appreciate you coming for us. Motion to close it, discussion.
Motion to close public discussion.
All in favor? Second.
Second.
All in favor, aye. Motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Wow. Wow. You gonna put the first floor in it?
Do we got a second?
Not yet.
There's a survey by Velker
Oh, that ain't worth the papers written.
dated 23rd July 2018 that says the front setback is 12.2 feet. So that would be a 7.8 foot variance, correct?
Check.
So we would be granting a 7.8 foot variance to the structure as it currently sits into the ability to remodel up above.
First floor and second floor.
Would you like to tie it to that survey? Would you like to tie it to the survey?
Assuming it's correct.
Yeah, assuming it's correct, to the footprint that it's actually at.
I think that would be wise.
Yeah.
Anything else, Charlie?
So the motion is to approve
Motion
contingent,
to approve the variance of a 7.5 foot setback. That would include the first and second story,
7.8 feet.
7.8 feet.
To the drawing where it is as platted by that survey.
The survey will be attached to the final order to be recorded.
assuming this gets seconded and approved.
I
So
second.
soon we
Okay.
get a second.
I
We got a second. Discussion. With,
I think there's an obvious
Charlie, you
hardship.
don't have to discuss.
Well, I don't know.
Okay.
You should.
You good? You good? You wanna start this one, how you vote?
I'm good.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? You got your variance. Thank you. You're welcome. Good luck to you. All right, who's our next victim? Sort that out so I can get a hold of it before.
Okay,
McKinley? Lee McKinley?
who did we get this from? Okay, so is this gonna be part of staff?
I'm not related.
Okay.
I don't know who that is.
This is the, what we're passing out, Mr. Chairman, it, Karen says is additional information provided by staff, so if and when they introduce, this will be part of their report.
State your name for the record.
My name is Ryan Garrity. I'm an attorney here in Walton County, and I'm representing Malcolm, who's the owner of the property. that
What is your
seeking the
name?
variance. Ryan Garrity. I'm the agent for the owner.
You practice in South Walden?
I do.
Look it up.
Okay, basically, I'm just gonna give you a rundown of why we're here. Mac needs a variance and is requesting it because he built a structure on the property after coming to Walton County and getting the appropriate permits to do so. So he went through the entire process of having a survey done, having it engineered, went through Walton County planning, everything was approved. He starts building. In the middle of building, his original contractor absconds with money and disappears for all intents and purposes. So he has to hire a new contractor. The new contractor comes in, and as part of protecting himself and looking to get a framing permit, he had an as-built survey done to show what was already there so that he wouldn't be liable for anything that might have been done wrong. So he calls to get the permit approved, or the framing inspection approved, and the framing inspection was denied because at that point in time, they determined that the footprint of the house was off by 2 inches in the southeast corner, and that the residence was encroaching on, in the front, setback 10 feet. That was the county's position.
Now, wait a minute now. You're talking about the front setback?
Both. We have two encumbrances.
Okay, you asked them, all right, let's deal with the front one.
Okay?
The front, you asked them for a 10-foot variance?
Yes, sir.
This other, wow. Contractor built the house 10 foot in the variance?
Well, no, he built it according to plan, and he built it according to a plan that was engineered by Ed Stanford. The survey was done by Volker, and the county approved it.
I wish to goodness Volker would lose his license.
So,
I mean, there should be something, Sidney, that we can do with him. Is there anything I tell you what we could do with him, deny it. I think we ought to deny it and let Mr. Volker pay for it, and then I think that might get his attention.
I would have asked you to approve it, and I'll still make him pay for it.
Can you put him out of business?
I don't know about that, but he's
Well,
certainly within my scope.
I don't understand out of the, I'm pretty comfortable in saying that every survey issue that we have, he is responsible for it, and he doesn't show up and defend his work. He came here one night and I didn't know him, and I wish to goodness I would have known who he was, because time and time again, homeowners are left in this situation because of his inability to do his work correctly. And surely we can do something to assist this attorney to maybe file a complaint with DPR.
Yes.
Let me ask you this, is it, Mr. Hayward, is it not, you probably not going like this, and I may not or ask you. So can't the board make a recommendation that Volker, that we can file a complaint with DPR on him, because it's time and time again we have the issue. So can we not vote on that later?
No, I think
Why?
that goes outside the scope of what you're allowed to do as a board. I think you've expressed your concerns to the county attorney, and she assured you that she.
You don't want to take this on, that's your problem.
Chairman, I have some questions about the survey prior to them developing. Because it's not as cut and dry with the front.
Well, let me get off of this survey issue, go ahead. Tell me
That's
what
fine.
you-
I'll address Mr.
Well,
Chick's
first of all,
question.
you asking for a 10-foot, what else are you
Yes, and
asking
then,
for?
okay, 10 foot from the front setback, which would be the from Campbell Street, and then on the southeast corner, a 2-inch variance in the corner, because,
Just in the corner.
yeah, if you go from 7.5 foot side setback to 7.3, I believe it is, but let me just double check the numbers.
Okay, now y'all just
minus 3 is 3.
discuss the rest of it. Go ahead, John.
6 inches
Well,
minus 3 inches.
Now, let's clarify, and it's a minor point, but it's 7.3, not 7 feet 3 inches.
Correct.
So you're asking
Correct.
for a 2/10 of a foot variance.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Survey measurements.
That was attorney measuring.
So this has a right of way that cuts through the property.
Yes, there could be some questions as to the interpretation of the code and how you would apply it. So I'm not prepared to throw Mr. Volker completely under the bus at this point in time, but, this road, depending on whether it is considered a local road, an arterial road, or whatever type of road it is classified on the classification map, which the classification map classifies it as an other type of road. It doesn't call it a local road or an arterial road, it calls it other. So there's no classification for other road, but it's clearly here on the surveys that were turned in, and it appears to have a 30-foot wide road access for it to sit within. So most roads are 40 feet. This one's only 30. But
Now,
what you can,
Wait a minute. Where's this lot at? What subdivision?
Seagrove, it's not a subdivision.
It's not in part of the old Seagrove subdivision south of, what is it, 30A?
No, it's not on the south side. It's on the
It's
north side of
side?
38. Yeah, it's, if you know where Snappy Turtle is, it's right behind it.
And it's not in a platted subdivision?
No, sir.
So this is not a platted road?
No, sir.
It is a county road?
Yes, sir.
And a county road is defined as what is maintained?
In my opinion, yes.
Well, how did you get up with 40 feet or 30 feet?
I'm going by with what the code says, and
does
why
the
there
code
might
say?
be some confusion by what Mr. Volker did versus the 20-foot setback minimum requirement in the first, in section 5 of the general provisions. Like I said, I don't want to throw him completely under the bus. I can see, what I think Mr. Volker did was he set back 40 feet from the property line, because this road that is maintained by the county sits completely on my client's lot,
And that's an easement.
but the easement's not in the deed to the property.
It doesn't have to be in the deed. It is all the county roads, especially your county roads that is off record, that has been off record, that has been maintained by the county. At one time, it was 4 years, but these roads that's maintained, the easement off record is the maintenance of the road. It doesn't have a legal description. You
Okay.
follow me?
I do. I'm just trying to explain what Volker might have been doing with how he did his survey, and how it might have been missed at the county when they were reviewing everything prior to building.
So what is the setback from an easement?
From the county road, which is 20 feet
20 feet from the road,
from the road.
not from the 30-foot.
No, it's from the road.
So that changes a little bit about this survey.
Which exhibit are you guys looking at in that way?
where his house is sitting on the property from this.
I'm looking at the Volker survey LD 7584 that's dated December. If you don't be quiet.
Please do.
Okay, I've got it. Exhibit 1.
24th of April 2017,
Yes.
where he shows that there's a 30-foot. I can assure you that the easement is what the county maintains, and the county will not step outside of that unless you give them permission to do so. It's all over the county that way, especially in the north end.
Mhm.
So, how big a hurry are you in?
Well, I started this back, the construction started January of 18, and,
Sir, you mind coming up?
State your name for the record.
okay, my name is Mac Lee, proper name is Greeley McKinley Lee Jr. I bought the lot in 2015,
How are you in a hurry to complete this? Because this is what I think. I think you need to go get a good survey to give you a good surveyor to give you a survey, starting from what you could get with Public Works to determine is a right-of-way by, what do you call that, prescriptive easement? And start it there, because I think that will help you in the long run. You need to establish that, and I think it will help you in the long run.
okay,
Well, we have, if you look at
We
exhibit,
got another one.
There has been.
yeah, that's the as-built survey. There's an as-built survey.
But it's stopping the lot at the
That's the second
30-foot
survey done by
Yeah, he's
easement
Johnson.
boundary. and
He's making
doesn't-
a deed and field call of 30-foot difference, and that's, it's,
Sketchy.
Don't you think he needs a good, don't you think,
I'll tell you, okay, I've been involved with Campbell Road and the surveying since 1992.
right,
There is no record easement
that's right.
on Campbell Road, but I agree with you that over time, there is a prescriptive easement
Right.
there, and of apparently a nominal width of 30 feet.
Where do you get 30 feet?
I'm sorry. Well, even on the,
It
even on
says
the
21
first,
feet paved, 40-foot right-of-way platted.
There ain't no way you get 30 feet.
30 feet is what is acknowledged on 2 different surveys.
I
Yeah.
can bet you $50 that ain't 30 feet down
I'm,
there.
I'm just going with what I have.
If it's a 40-foot right-of-way,
But we don't know that it is because we don't
And
know
it's
what type of
supposed to
road it is. It's
split
an other.
20 feet on his lot and 20 feet on the other lot,
Correct.
then where he's
Where
built the
did he-
house is actually correct.
Where
Correct.
do you get, wait a minute, where do you get splitting on the lot?
Because this survey calls out a 40-foot right-of-way. So so you would assume that it would be 20 feet on
I
either
don't
side.
care what it's, like, first of all, you gotta determine where he's getting his right of way. There's not a 40-foot right of way.
Well, this survey says that there's a 40-foot.
I think you need to get a
platted.
different survey by a good surveying company, and I think you need to get, Public Works.
We did have a second survey done. That was the as-built survey.
I think you need to get a,
It's in the packet as exhibit.
Immediately after the Volker survey.
is this it?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I don't agree with your second survey showing a 40-foot easement. There's no way that there is anything recorded of record that shows a 40-foot easement down there. Now, what Jeff has said, if there's a 40-foot easement, then it should be divided. Your easement is prescriptive. It's what has been maintained by Public Works.
Okay.
I have no problem in hearing this tonight if you want to go ahead with it, but I think it'd be in your best interest to get a survey. Don't you agree?
And an opinion from Public Works.
Right.
Yes, sir. As to what the limits of the maintained right-of-way is.
But the documents that and we'll be glad to hear it. If you want us to hear it, we'll hear it.
Okay, my question is this, is that we were trying to get a permit, inspection passed, and the inspector is the one who denied a framing inspection based on this footprint.
Where are you at on your construction? Does it
He
ride
is
in?
framed and decked, and, I mean, he needs to keep going, or it's gonna ruin.
To the insulated corner.
It's dried in?
Yes.
Outside finish?
Yes.
And if I may, I believe Mr. Johnson's concern is that you could actually find out that the right-of-way is different even from your second survey.
We're prepared to adjust our request to whatever you guys think would work, as long as he can continue to build.
We grant you a 10-foot, this is my problem with this. We take and grant you a 10-foot variance. We don't know where the road right-of-way is. We could come down here and grant you a 10-foot variance based on these two. Down the road, there could be another survey, and another survey could catch the road where it really is, and our variance wouldn't be no good. Because your surveys, in my opinion, does not describe the road, because the road is set at 40-foot right-of-way. I just
So-
don't. And if it's a 40-foot right-of-way,
Well, that's why I was talking
the
about.
first survey is wrong, and if it's a 40-foot right-of-way, then you're gonna have to ask for a,
Wouldn't the 40-foot be split on the property line?
That's what everybody
You wouldn't
thinks down
need a
there,
variance.
but that's not the case. When you actually go down there and see it, you can see that the road is completely on his lot, and it's not split
this is
on
what
either
happened.
side.
Here's a piece of property. Back when Jack Jr. used to go down there in his wild days, nobody was down there from Alabama, Tennessee, and Georgia. They just drove through there four-wheeling. Over the years, it got used, and next thing you know, somebody bought, and they knew WF Miles, and said, grade my road. So he started grading the road, because he's a good old boy. Needs some dirt, needed dirt. That's the easement. And then you break up lots in here, you don't, it could be over here. Am I not telling the truth or not, Jack?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm agreeing with you that that these documents are conflicting and
If it's okay, look at your one that says it's a 30-foot. Look at your 30-foot
but
easement.
look at the tax appraiser side. It's a very straight road. And they've actually broken out the road as a separate parcel. But there's a clear.
Boy, we don't wanna get involved in that.
The question would be, I think what you were saying is, you can ask the applicant if they want to go on what's presented.
Hey,
No, it's the applicant's decision, is what I'm saying.
but listen to me. This survey here is showing a 30-foot, and they're asking for a 20-foot.
No, I understand,
But if you go to a 40-foot, it goes from a 10-foot to a 20-foot, because you add in 10 more feet.
Yeah.
You're gonna ask for a 20-foot variance that it's gonna be in the middle of the road. The house will be at the edge of the road. We don't know what we're doing.
And that's what I'm saying. If the applicant says, this is all I got, this is all I'm gonna present, then they present what they present. I mean, you can tell them you don't.
But if it's not correct, we can't put the county in that position.
That's what I'm saying. You can postpone the hearing if you want to have them go get that information for you.
Okay.
What is the exact information you're looking for? A title search to?
No, you don't want a title search. You want a survey from a good survey working with Public Works to determine the right-of-way on Campbell Street. Now, I'm not trying to drum up any business for, let me put it like this. If I knew a company that did extensive work down there for a number of years that understand Campbell Street, and that's
I think I know who that is.
that would probably be who I would look up in the phone book. But to me, I'd just be right, frank, honest with you. There ain't no way I'm voting on anything tonight. But if you want to hear it, we'll hear it. But once we deny it, you're done. You gotta tear the house down. And I'm not voting for something, I don't know what is a good survey to show me exactly what we put in the county in the position. Cause you gonna sue the county if another survey comes in there and says, you're wrong. You gotta have a 20-foot variance. You done been here and got a 10-foot variance. You follow me?
Oh, I follow you. So what I'm concerned about is this, okay, if Campbell Road has been, if this is a problem for Mac, how is it not a problem for everybody else on that street?
It is a problem. The right of way is prescriptive.
Okay, so when we come in and ask for a variance based on this information and we get a prescriptive easement, I'm sitting here trying to think, I don't want to negatively affect everybody else on the street.
Most surveyors would do what he's done and advise you accordingly because he has extensive work. Am I right or wrong?
I believe you're basically right, yes, sir. And may I direct a question to Mr. Carpenter? Do we know conclusively if Campbell Road is county maintained?
Yes.
It is for a portion of it. I don't know exactly. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Campbell Road, where it intersects 38, is maintained for a certain length.
Yes, ma'am.
But I'm not exactly sure where that maintenance ends. It does at some point. So what I was going to suggest, if we do continue this item, Mr. Garrity could get in contact with Buddy Wright at Walton County Public Works. And Public Works can easily go out there and mark off what their routine maintenance of Campbell Street is.
Scott Cook is extremely
Yes.
good, and he knows, I can assure you, he knows that right away. And he's the
I'm
one.
sorry, who did you?
Scott Cook. He's the one that does the field work under Scott.
Rosenham.
Rosenham used to be here that
I know Scott.
quit and got a gravy job with the county because Scott does all his work.
Right. I don't know if, they're gonna have time to do a full survey, but they can at least go out and mark the areas of the maintenance.
I guarantee you, he's got it in his notes.
Yes, sir, he probably does.
And I would think they could concentrate in this area. And as a second note, if it is determined to be county maintained, will the county accept less than a 40-foot right-of-way by maintenance?
Show the road.
Or can you even answer
Yeah,
that?
so that's
This is
just
where the road
based
is?
on where we don't
And this is
have
where the road is. Both of
a
them show the
dedicated
actual-
right-of-way. It's just based on how much we
Yeah,
have
but they show the
maintained over the
pavement, where the
years.
pavement
Okay,
actually
so
is. So
if a
sure,
nominal distance turned out to be 30 feet centered on the road, okay, then that would, yes, you'd have to have some definition like that for what you're really asking for.
Who did you buy the lot from?
Gosh, I have the paperwork, it was, some people owned it in California.
It's up there on,
It was part of an estate, I think, that somebody inherited and then they were selling.
and not my ex-wife on it, looked like the
And
one I
this,
used to own.
this site plan was submitted with your request for planning approval, and it was approved by the planning department as a 40-foot setback from the lot line, so.
Mr. Chairman, both of these surveys appear to indicate that the roadway easement is 30 feet. What's an error on on Mr. Buckler's survey is he failed to measure the front setback from the extent of the easement, and merely applied the previous right-of-way protection zone language to a local street, which would not be appropriate. Setback should be measured from the extent of the easement. Both of these surveys make it certainly appear, although neither one was performed with title opinion or title search, that roadway is 30 feet wide, and it encumbers the eastern end of the lot.
Don't one of them,
Both of them have the same dimension.
That one says 40.
40 feet.
Your second survey.
Oh, he's saying the building setback line is 40 feet, but both of them show 30 feet.
It says 40-foot right-of-way paved.
Well, the second survey may have had a typo.
If y'all will take a look at the pictures, let me just, there are
21
some
feet
pictures that
is
show the
shown.
road.
21 feet paved, 40 feet right of way.
Yeah.
You need to get a good survey. You need to get with Public Works. We need that before we continue. That's my opinion. Now, what do you want to do?
Would you like to table it? How would we be able to get back in next month? It's the 4th.
We can continue it and be back in because it's been advertised, right? Thank you.
We won't have to,
Pardon me?
We just announced the date at this meeting.
Okay, what date is our next meeting?
Fourth Thursday.
March 28th.
and we won't have to redo any of the notices.
No. We'll make it easy as possible on you.
Yes, I will request that we table this till March 28th.
Need a motion?
Oh, continue, sorry, continue.
Motion?
I make a motion we continue to March 28th.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Very good. Thank you for working with us. I think
Oh,
it'd be in
well.
your best interest.
Sounds like it.
But what I would do now, listen, I would get hold of Scott Cook, Public Works, or, who did you? Buddy Wright. And Scott Cook is one that would be doing the survey, and he's jam up. He'll do a good job, and he'll do it quick. If they ask him to, he'll get in there and get it done.
Okay.
And then you know what you're dealing with. To get him to establish it, and then get whatever company in the yellow pages and surveyor, and get them to do the survey from Scott Cook's work. Right, Mr. Burgess?
Yes, and I would also consult with the county surveyor himself,
Well, that'd be,
Scott Rosenheim.
well, they, yeah,
They're working together.
oh, yeah.
Scott works for the county now.
Yes.
I told you he got a McGravy job. He's
I
retired.
heard you say that. I wasn't sure if you were talking about him or someone else, but
He's retired. He's like Matt Carpenter.
is
He's
he still,
retired.
is he still out in Freeport? Is he living out in Freeport still?
Yeah. We got a lot of discussion first. He in a hurry? Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have 3 minutes.
No, we're not, we're gonna drag it out. He's done packed up, ready to go.
I'm fine. I'm going out there on my next break and
March, September 27th minutes, motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, aye?
Aye.
I was gonna say you could do them all together if you wanted to.
Your motion was all of them, right?
My motion.
Your second.
Sure.
That's where everybody,
Okay, I just
Say
wanted to
that.
make sure
all right.
that Karen raised it.
Is it a problem if I was absent for the third one?
No,
That's not.
not a problem.
Not at all.
It's not. No, really, it's not.
It's kind of
Yeah,
quiet.
You're right.
I guess everybody knows, since we have a whole bunch of new ones, that the appeal goes to the circuit court. After 30 days, they have a right to go to circuit court will make a determination. If they uphold it, then their next appeal is to the appeals court. If they're in violation, they have 30 days to issue a cease and desist order. It is up to the attorney, and I think we need to, there's been a case where that was not done, but we need to make sure that our attorneys, not say Hayward, but our attorneys issue the cease and cease order. And that stops any other litigation to that particular case. And one day I'm gonna get into some specifics on it, but that's a generality. So, any questions? You happy? You gonna stay with us?
Sure, we'll give it a try.
You need to stay with us. They're not this complicated, are they, Jack? The-
And Mr. Johnson, I was just talking to Vivian and Mac, the conditional uses is a new thing under the updated land development code, so we will be seeing more of those as a board.
We'll be seeing conditional use things at the zoning
Yeah,
board?
the second part of so that's new. I don't know what the
You don't like
general number is or how many, but
You're not happy?
No, surprised.
I think.
Oh, we got a lot of new stuff gonna come before us. You can't put an RV on a lot less than 5 acres unless you come before us.
Do what?
You cannot put an RV on a lot less than 5 acres without coming before this board to live in. You can't set up a power pole, septic tank, move in it anymore. That's a thing of the past.
That's the entire
If my
county?
place was to burn, I couldn't move an RV.
How many acres do you have?
I got 1 acre, 1.5
You
acre.
can do it because you have a power pole, but don't tell the planning department because they find you a violation.
No, actually, there is an exception for that. You can have one during an active building permit and building process. If you're building a house,
Building permitted, but he's not gonna build, he's gonna live in it because he likes it.
well, in that case, follow Joe's advice. But no, there are a number of, in chapter 1, there's a whole section on RVs and where they can be. Generally, there's supposed to be in RV parks. But there are exceptions for parcels larger than 5 acres. It varies by land use district. And one of the things that we've encountered throughout the county is someone living in an RV permanently right next to $1 million house. And it becomes an appraisal issue.
What about the fellow that's got a house, got a nice house, and he's got a nice RV, and he's got his RV hooked up next to his house? He doesn't actually live in it, but he keeps it hooked up and uses it for guests and
That's not an issue.
not an issue.
It needs to be an issue because I'm gonna take and build some storage for them and I need the county not allowed.
Mac, what
We'll
what
deal
are
with
the
that when it
customary
comes.
use things that would be coming before us?
All kinds of stuff.
I'm sorry?
How does the customary use thing,
Strip joints.
Conditional
Stuff like
uses?
Not customary use.
I thought he said customary use.
Conditional.
Oh,
use, like-
never
like I
mind.
said, the
I have
number-
a
the second-
pronunciation problem.
I'm thinking beach.
I mean,
property.
conditional uses previously were heard by the Board of County Commissioners, which required a major development. Not all conditional uses do require that. So this is an opportunity to streamline the development review process and reduce the cost for taxpayers.
And we do a better job in county commissioners.
Karen, I wanted to talk to you.
And to provide a little bit of variety for this particular
something.
board.
We don't get enough.
I don't know if we need to make a motion or, well, you guys need to discuss for the meeting, as far as Freeport.
Yes, we now have the Freeport BCC boardroom available for meetings. We'll have our first public meeting there. The Technical Review Committee will be meeting there next Wednesday. The Design Review Board, since its purview is south of the bay on US 98 and 331, will continue to meet in this room until it's not available during reconstruction or expansion. The Planning Commission has elected to have their March 14th meeting in Freeport. The Code Enforcement Board will be having their March 24th or 21st meeting in Freeport. This board is eligible to have their meetings in Freeport. You
I
get,
heard y'all didn't have adequate parking. How does that process?
well, generally that has not been a problem. We are looking for some additional parking. You may recall that the north building is substantially vacant. So.
What?
Is substantially vacant at the present time. So essentially half the space is not being used for anything other than storage and not generating a parking requirement. County is actively pursuing the purchase of a parcel that is actually under contract just south of the new Freeport Commons building.
I just find that interesting. The county will buy a building without adequate parking and gives us a fit because we try to build something, well, we think is adequate. And they think it's not adequate. Anyway, that's here or there. May I have a
Wouldn't that
motion
city
to
of
have the-
Freeport?
Excuse me?
Hey, can you put that off in the city of Freeport?
Well, the county did not approve that building.
That's it.
That was approved
Well, I
within
take back
the
my
city of
statement.
Freeport's jurisdiction.
So,
When's
I
our-
guess the question is, are we gonna have, I mean,
I'm trying to get a motion.
the meeting at Freeport, or do you wanna have it here?
I'm trying to have a motion. What date?
That was the same day.
Same
You
day.
just wait 28.
Since we
28?
just continued one, do we need to make it
March 28th.
to this building or?
No. They'll be notified.
Yeah, okay.
I like this building.
You like this building?
You don't wanna see the new one?
Why do you like this building?
It's closer to my office.
You're closer home when you leave.
I gotta go back to work.
You gotta go back to work.
Oh, yeah.
It don't matter to me. Whatever y'all wanna do.
This one is closer to your office than the other one? Yeah.
Well, I haven't
Not
moved
that-
into
not
the
as
new
big
office
as
in
the
Freeport
office,
yet.
but, okay.
When are you gonna
All
move?
right. Okay.
Hopefully before June.
Oh, for crying out loud, you can sacrifice to them.
We can just try it in March, and if we don't like it, y'all move it back down here. So this is, because once this part becomes unavailable.
At some point, this room will be unavailable because this side will be expanded out to the lobby to increase the capacity of this room.
To the TDC or Freeport.
Motion to move the Freeport, our meetings to Freeport. Need a motion.
I'll make a motion to move our meetings to Freeport.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
How did you vote?
Opposed.
Anything else, Gary?
Let's go, I'm hungry.
Motion to approve,
Make a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, aye. Very good.
Thank y'all very much.
You guys have too much fun.
Take everybody's book.